Buongiorno, everybody. Day for the sprinters, we think, today, or those who want to get out in a breakaway. It's the last chance for a lot of people, with the two remaining road stages being big mountainous tests, and the final day, a time trial around Fair Verona, where we will lay our last scene. Big news at the start of the day is that the Portuguese wait for a Grand Tour winner is going to have to go on. Joaquim Agostinho is the only Portuguese rider to have reached the podium in a Grand Tour. João Almeida was in a great position to be the second, but I'm afraid a COVID positive test overnight. He felt unwell, was up in the night, has meant that he will not be at the start today. So Juan P. Lopez has the white jersey on his back. And Vincenzo Nibali moves from 5th to 4th. And for the podium, there's a nice big buffer back to Nibali. It's still Carapaz in pink, Hindley at 3 seconds in second place. And Mikel Landa now on the podium at 1 minute and 5 seconds. Sunshine is back, and we've got Matt White back at the microphones to tell us what his plan is with Bike Exchange.
Matt, give us a short summary of the injury of Simon Yates, of course, yesterday having to abandon the Giro d'Italia.
Yeah, so he's obviously been injured for a long time, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster managing it for Simon. Our medical team's done a really good job. And it came to a point there where it just wasn't worth continuing, and the best for his future races and his future program was to stop now. I think the stage before was obviously a very, very tough day. It stirred the injury up a little bit, and the decision was made between our medical team and Simon that it's time to stop.
What are those next targets for Simon then in the near future?
Well, we have to let the dust settle. Firstly, get over. He's already on his way back home now to get some scans in Barcelona, and we'll have more information in the coming days. But now the best thing is just to recover. He's got to recover from here, physically, mentally, see what the actual injury, what treatment is needed going forward, and then we'll sit down and discuss what we've got plans for summer.
Still a few more stages to go for the rest of the team, though. What are your hopes and targets for the remaining riders there?
Yeah, look, today's a tricky one, that's for sure. We haven't got a sprinter, but you wouldn't be surprised if you see some of our guys being a little bit aggressive at certain phases of the race today. Then we've got a couple of ideas for the next 2 days. We've obviously got Lucas Hamilton just outside the top 10 on general classification. It would be nice to move him into the top 10 if possible. And then I think Matteo Sobrero will start Sunday as one of the favourites for the TT. You know, the guys who are competitive in Hungary, some of those guys have gone home, including Simon, including Dumoulin. The GC guys will be very tired come Sunday, whereas Matteo has the luxury of now not having Simon there. His role can be adjusted between now and Sunday, that he can be a lot fresher than others.
Thank you, and best of luck for the stage today.
Thanks, cheers.
Well, we'll expect them to be aggressive at certain points. Those points might come on a couple of climbs towards the end. Sean Kelly's alongside me, Rob Hatch. Buongiorno, Sean. What are we expecting today? Most people say sprint.
Well, you would expect a sprint. You know, the sprinters have hauled us up the mountains to get to this stage, and they're not going to leave this one slip through their fingers, and their teams are going to control. And you know, when you look at the sprinters are still in there, you know, Demar, he's going to be really up for trying to get another stage win. Cavendish, the list goes on, and you know, Bauhaus there, Consoni, Gaviria, maybe Modulo might put up one of these great sprints, which he did quite a number of years ago. But yeah, there's a lot of interest here. But again, who's interested in going the breakaway? So it's a hard one to call, and that's the great thing about those starts. We could see a big fight going on. It could go on, and not what the GC men want. They want a rest day after these 2 days of, you know, really difficult racing. But yeah, you have no control. If there's a lot of teams wanting to go, well, then it's going to be a big fight.
Peloton rolling to kilometre 0 just outside the town of Borgo Valsugana. A daily conversation between race director Alocchio and his best buddy, Davide Formolo, who's there on the car. Disappointing for Formolo and UAE Emirates today with the withdrawal of João Almeida, who was in 4th place and still in with a chance of a podium. Their objectives will turn today, you'd think, to Fernando Gaviria. But what does everybody else want? Let's see, because there are lots of teams up towards the front hoping to try and attack. Eolo Cometa EF Education Easy Post going for it. Alpecin Phoenix as well. 2 riders of theirs trying to get up the road. There's a rider from Bardiani, another from Dronopper, and here comes Chris Juhl Jensen as well. Question is, Sean Kelly, will the likes of Groupama FDJ let too many men up the road?
Well, they will try not, and a lot of the other teams will do the same. You know, just have the men up front and just watch what's going and try and get a small breakaway, and then it's easy to control. And you can see here there's action, but again, it's a little bit slower. We didn't see that sprint like we see in the earlier part of this race, where it's like a track sprint. You know, the legs, they haven't got that in them, and now it's going to be just look and wait and watch and see who is going. And you can see here, you know, a number of riders, Jumbo-Visma, just you know, following on here, and yeah, it'll be an interesting one. I would be surprised if they get away at, you know, easily, but we can see, you know, a lot of interest here.
Yeah, Groupama and Quickstep, the teams seemingly want to control anything bigger than 2-3 men. I imagine they'll be worried about big-name teams as well today, because there's a difference, isn't there, usually between the quality of those World Tour riders getting up there and the second division teams, certainly when you're thinking about Dronopper and Bardiani.
Well, they have to try. The teams with the wildcard, the invitation teams into this race, they are going to try. And Alpecin, of course, we can see they have, you know, been very active in this race. But we can see there's a lot of riders just following. Some teams have riders here just watching and following and you know, controlling the thing and try to leave a breakaway, get away, small group, and get it settled down. That's what they want here in this. It's a short stage, so it's going to be not a difficult one for the riders, but that also brings us problems because some of the riders will decide, well, we could go all the way in this one.
Interesting that Peter said he was there. Was he chasing that down, marking, or was he trying to slip away and make sure that Quickstep don't have to ride today?
No, I think he should be just closing things down and watching, and if he does slip into a group, he'll, you know, just glass crank, as they said, which means easy pedaling, not pushing. And when you have somebody like that to get away, well, then it's always the killer of the breakaway.
Eduardo Affini rides close to home today, not too far from Treviso. He hails in Mantova. Jumbo-Visma, no sprinter, no GC option, so a chance for him, complete freedom. Movistar, nothing in the GC either, as a chance for them to be in the breakaway. And I'm looking down at the teams who will definitely want to sprint today, Sean, and I can see 4. Groupama FDJ, DSM, Quickstep Alpha Vinyl, UAE Emirates. There might be another couple of maybes, the likes of Cofidis and what have you as well.
Yes, I think Cofidis will just play the card, leave the other teams chase, leave the big teams. And they have been doing that in this race, and they know that the bigger teams there with a real fast man, they're going to try and control, and that's what they'll do, just follow and wait, and then the final try and position that man in the sprint. And Consoni is the one who has been up there, and he's been impressive in the sprints. He's been closer a number of times, but it all depends on the sprinters. How have they got through those mountain stages? And we see Mark Cavendish there. You know, he was very chirpy this morning and giving out a little bit about the climb in the end, but yeah, that's all part of racing of the modern day. Maybe when back in the time of Moser, Saroni, those guys, and the Italian sprinters more so, they'd have a flat stage and it would be a pan flat one. They wouldn't go near a hill. But today's racing, yeah, the organisers like to put something interesting in during the stage.
Oh, we want something interesting to watch as well, don't we, as we see Eduardo Affini up there. Something else that's interesting is that Magnus Kort seems very, very keen on trying to get up the road as well for EF Education Easy Post. He's been following. There he is with the pink helmet on. You imagine that Israel Premier Tech will want to get a man as well, because they've no longer got their sprinter, Giacomo Nizzolo. Movistar have tried with Loscano before as a group off the front here, and not going just yet in our slightly uphill start. And after the last couple of days, there'll be some sore legs, won't there?
Well, you can see there that you know, the way the riders are, you know, pushing on the front here, you can see that the fatigue is there a lot. And you know, the riders that are really fatigued, you will try in the earlier part try and get into the breakaway, but we can see here there's you know, a big group getting away, but it's difficult to see that one working. We can see front of the peloton, you know, there's a chase on already.
152 kilometres remaining. We just had a few kilometres of racing. Adam Blythe has joined us in the commentary box. Buongiorno, Adam.
Buongiorno, come stai?
Bene, 4 days to go, 4 giorni. What's going to happen today?
I think it's going to be a sprint. Well, I hope it's going to be a sprint. We've not seen one for a while. We're just saying we've not done the touchscreen downstairs with me and Robbie, so we'd like to analyse something. But I think it's going to be a fast and furious one. We've seen a little split there. A lot of riders trying to get clear. Last opportunity for a lot of them with a lot of hard days coming up. Well, not a lot of hard days, a few hard days and a time trial coming up. So, yeah, we can see that split. There's about 40, 30 riders in the front. It's going to be a fast and furious one, I think.
Makes it hard to control, and at this point in the race, it changes the dynamic, doesn't it? Because it's not like turning up on day one, day two, where you know there's going to be 7, 8 teams even who've got sprinters and they want to control things. You've got people who are fresh, looking after GC riders. Now, you've got half the peloton who've got complete freedom because they know their team, either the sprinter's gone home or they can't win the Giro d'Italia now. This is the last chance for a lot of guys to get something out of the race, and that's why there's a bit of a fight here, and that's why this might be just too difficult to control, Adam.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to control. You're going to have all of Quick-Step, all of FDJ to try and control. So you can see Ballerini there, sat fourth wheel. There's another Quick-Step rider, so 2 riders in the front. Peter Seri moving up on the left. Got Leerberger as well from Quick-Step. The 2 big sprint teams that are here trying to control things, but there's a lot more riders that want this to go away and get away rather than it be controlled.
Magnus caught Dries de Bont, and that's being chased down straight away by the rider from Quick-Step. That was James Knox, who is then told by Bert van Leerberger just to hold on. They'll be happy to control just 2 riders, even if it's 2 top riders.
Yes, I think that was the call, and he probably, James Knox, realised himself that, you know, if this one can get out there, leave 2 riders get away, perfect situation, and that's what the sprinters teams, Quick-Step, are looking for here. But I don't think it's going to settle. We can see there, you know, the front of the peloton, more riders wanting to come out, and this looks like it could go on for quite a while, and it's good because, you know, the racing is going to be a fast one here, and it's going to be a good day's racing.
Cast your minds back to stage 18 in 2019. Similar profile, down into a similar area. Small break got away, but it was just too difficult to control. And it was a second division team and a rider who's actually now retired, Damiano Cima, who just got the better of the peloton. 2 years ago in the autumn Giro d'Italia, again, same point of the race, there was a miscalculation by the sprinters and Josef Czerny went away. So there's a bit of history here, isn't there, Adam, at this time in the race, just because of all the factors we've mentioned. It's not necessarily as simple. It's not a mathematical equation, is it really, like it is at the start of the race?
No, it's not at all. And I think what makes this stage interesting, I think they come into, well, I know that they come into Verona, they do a little lap there at the end, and we can see how stretched out it was just by a few corners in there, and riders almost a little bit relaxed. I think when they come into Verona, they need to be hugely switched on, especially the GC teams, because splits can happen left, right, going through, not through traffic, but in the town centre, it can get very, not dangerous, but splits can happen. Someone lets the wheel go, and if you're up there on GC, especially for Carapaz and Hindley, they need to keep an eye on each other.
That was Francesco Gavazzi, still searching for a Giro d'Italia stage, and he's going to his home region today. One thing that might change the nature of who's attacking, if there's the legs there, there's a lot of Italian cyclists who come from the Veneto, who want to show their faces at the front today. We've already seen it with Affini. I'm intrigued to see what's going to happen when we get to Valdobbiadene at the sprint, and then that really steep climb, Muro di Ca del Poggio, because if the breakaway is not within too much distance and you haven't made the break, there's maybe a chance to attack there later on in the race as well. We'll see. Final 50 Ks or so. For now, it's Dries de Bont, Magnus Cort, Davide Gabburro and Edoardo Affini. It's a really strong group of 4, this.
It's a very strong group indeed, especially with Affini in there. He's a very good time trialer, lead out man as well, so he's got that fast acceleration. A couple of groups behind, but you can see 3 Quick-Step riders in there, 3 Francis de Giro. They don't want this going anywhere. Straight onto the wheels, look, second wheel, third wheel. They want that breakaway to go away. 4 riders are a lot easier to control than 7 or 8 riders.
Now looks like DSM are trying to police this alongside with Quick-Step and Groupama as well. They're starting to put a couple of jerseys up there to control things. You mentioned Affini there. He is a local rider. The Veneto comes from Mantova, just down the road from Treviso. And like many, realistically, Sean, this is his last chance to get something out of the race, apart from maybe the time trial on Sunday.
Yes, well, the riders that are out in the four-man group here, you know, Magnus Cort as well, you know, it's a last throw of the dice, really, and give it a go. Feeney as well, of course, the local guy. And see, can you get an advantage and maybe go all the way to the finish? And, you know, those guys are, you know, super guys if they get to the end, but I don't think they get into that final 30-40 kilometres with any advantage. You can see the marking is going on here, but yeah, Olo still, you know, they want to push on here. But you can see, you know, DSM there as well, just hanging around there, closing it down. There's a lot of teams here that just want to stay out there in front, and that would be the perfect scenario for the rest of the day.
Adam, surprised to see none of your former teammates from Lotto Soudal trying to get up the road today, maybe, because their sprint has gone home as well.
They're probably knackered, Rob. I can imagine there's a lot of riders that are quite knackered and just looking forward to an easy day. I don't think it's really going to suit them. I think out of all the riders in that team that's left, De Gent would probably have a go, but I think the riders are just absolutely nailed.
It's a special day for Thomas De Gent today, Adam. It's 10 years to the day since he did what he did on the Stelvio.
Yeah, he's probably always lead-out man's dropped off the back there. Vivo, hopefully he's all right. I'm sure he'll get back on.
He's been struggling the last couple of days since his crash again. He's really started to lose a lot of time, down to 10th in the standings, and I think it's just about survival now to the end for Domenico Pozzovivo.
Probably not just for him, for a lot of riders in that peloton.
It looks as though Sean Eolo are under really strict embargo to get under the brake here.
Yes, they are. They're really trying here, but again, as we just talked about, you know, the fatigue is in the legs, so when you go on the attack there, you're not able to put in a real big one, and it's being closed down by so many riders. They're sort of bullying the front of the peloton here, the team of sprinters that wanted to this four-man group just to stay out there, get that advantage of, you know, a minute and a half, 2 minutes, and then it starts calming down, because the teams that want to go like Eolo, they will lose interest once it gets a minute and 30, and that would be the real situation for the sprint teams. It would be an easy day to control, but yeah, there's going to be a lot more trying here. But you can see the riders are tired. And talking about Lotto Soudal, Thomas De Gent, he would love to try and have a go here today, but I think a lot of riders are not even trying because they know just the legs, they haven't got it.
They've been racing for 10 kilometres. A breakaway of sorts. You can see behind sprint teams trying to block the road. Nice wide road, main road to do that. Groupama are there, Quick Step, DSM, all the teams who want to sprint. Look, they're trying to get their bodies there. Guarnieri on the far side. This might be the moment. 19 seconds, it starts to grow. But someone will try and slip through. Smiles for now. They'll stay like that if it stays like that. This could be the moment. Look at that. Every inch of the road occupied.
All as well. You've got from the left to the right, Francis Tejeur, Quick Step, DSM, Quick Step, Francis Tejeur, DSM. There's just a whole spread. There's no other teams on the front apart from one other team there that's blocking the road, so we can tell Bardiani, yeah, what the sprint teams want to do today. It's very, very clear. No one's
Bardiani already have a man up the road as well.
Blocking for the man up the road.
Perfect scenario.
Interesting, 35 seconds. It's growing quite quickly. This, I guess we'll know in a few minutes, Sean, whether this is the one or not now.
Yes, well, we'll know if this is the break is going to go out there and, you know, speed controlled. And yeah, when it gets to that, you know, 45 seconds a minute, maybe even, you know, that 40 seconds could be enough, because, you know, the riders that want to get into the breakaway, the small teams, Olo, we've seen there, they've been aggressive, but, you know, the attacks have been mou, as they say in French, you know, they have been weak attacks. And, yeah, once the gap goes to that 45 seconds, at this point in the race, well, then it's going to be a difficult one. In the earlier part, you know, in the earlier days, if minute and a half, 2 minutes, they'll still try because you're feeling fresh. But here, you know, it's not surprising that there's a lot of riders really on the limit here, and fatigue is a big problem.
A few stretching out. There's Van der Poel with the red number on his back. It's Lemres, who was another candidate for that yesterday, and having a chat about what might have been those two.
Yes, and you know, what a final they put up on that, the final difficult climb of the day, and it looked like Van der Poel was going to go all the way. Suddenly he runs out of power, and Lemreiser takes it up, and looked like he had enough of an advantage, but no, he just started to slow down as well, and caught just before the top.
Here we go. A rider from Eolo Cometa managed to sneak through the armada blocking things in the port there.
They just need to let him go. Just let one rider go and then it's done. Just block the road again. Let one go. Just let him drift off the front now and then get back to blocking the road. One rider, I don't think he's going to make much of a difference, and he's going to be absolutely knackered if he can even get across to a minute gap as well.
It makes sense, that, would it, Sean?
It would, but it's difficult to leave one rider go, because there'll be always somebody want to, you know, follow in the wheel, and they will jump around. When it's like this, you know, it's lined out a bit, there's surely some riders from Drome Hopper there, you know, not too far off, and they will try and then you have two, then you have three, so they're just yeah, it's the blocking mode here at the moment, and just close it down, and yeah, this break now is, you know, starting slowly to pull out towards the minute.
You can understand, Adam, why these second division teams, the Drone Hoppers and the Bardianis, are desperate for today's break, Eolo as well, because this is their big lottery ticket. This is the one where they really have a chance, if any, of there being a miscalculation at the end.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's really difficult, isn't it? 'Cause it's just the way that all the riders feel within the peloton. They could be feeling good, they could be feeling bad, but if there's enough of them that go up the road, they have a big chance of, like you said, the miscalculation and staying away till the finish.
4 riders have got almost a minute, but there are still riders trying behind. Eolo Cometa, here's Thomas Segent now, who appears at the front. I was wondering whether he was trying to sneak up the road, and here he goes. Just following the move for now. Samuele Rivi and Mirko Maestri have both tried in the last few minutes. Another rider from Alpecin is in there. Of course, they've already got Dries de Bont. And 4 riders with almost a minute. You think that it's nearly done. But there are a lot of people who are desperate to try and get up the road just in case today. It's a shorter stage, there's a lot of tired legs, there are less sprint teams to control, and as we've been saying earlier on in the broadcast, there's a bit of a history at this time of the race where breaks have just managed to survive. Czerny a couple of years ago, Cima 3 years ago, and by the way, Cima's back at the race. He's working. He's Enrico Gasparotto, who's now a DS. It's his replacement as a motorbike regulator. Damiano Cima will be having a lot of fun, I think, today. In the end, watching people trying to fight for the break from the motorbike and helping them on. He's part of a team of ex-riders, including Paolo Simeon, Enrico Barbin, and Paolo Longo Borghini, who are the motorbike regulators this year, the ex-riders. Gasparotto, I mentioned, did that job last year before he stepped into a big role, hasn't he, this year as the sports director for Bora.
First role of his protocol was getting Velcro on the rain jacket.
Yes, a lot of teams have done that, haven't they, as well now? If you look at Groupama doing that yesterday with Arnaud Demar. Now then, there was a little sign from Seri. Was he saying, well, just let this guy go? I'm not sure. They should do. They'd have an easier time of it now, as long as that didn't encourage others, as Sean was just saying there.
Yeah, let's not forget they've probably got the 2 team bosses on the ground as well, Eolo Cometa, Ivan Basso and the legend Alberto Contador, both legends actually. So if they're anywhere near or in the car, having those 2 in your ear along with Sean Yates saying get in the brake is something you know that you have to try and do, but at the same time you're like, oh really, can I not just sit here for a little bit please, I'm knackered.
Well, the last man who was trying was the brother of the man who's been up the road a lot of times already, racing for a different team. This was Davide Bais, the last man to try. Of course, we've seen Mattia Bais walking away with the breakaway classification at the moment. And for Magnus Cort, well, he's been working hard. Look at that heart rate, right up there, 176 beats a minute. They've got over a minute now, so you'd start to think that this is more or less a done deal, isn't it, Sean?
Looks like that. You can see in the front of the peloton, you know, the interest has really gone out of the teams that need to try and get across on Eolo. You know, they did try their best, but again, I think just they hadn't got the men, you know, in the shape to try and do that. And yeah, when you miss a move with the riders we've got, yeah, it's going to be looking like it's going to be the break of the day and allowed to get that number of minutes and then start controlling. But yeah, there's a number of teams that I thought, like Bike Exchange, I thought they might be more active as well, you know, with the situation they're in now. But I think we did talk about Lotus Soudal. We see Thomas Legent appearing there, but not doing a lot. And you could go through the teams and say this morning, well, they're going to try, but I think, yeah, the legs are just not allowing it.
Matt White talked about being active at certain points in the race today. And when he says that, I look down at the profile and look at Muro di Ca del Poggio. Of course, it's a little bump on the profile. It only goes up to 242 metres. But any of you who've watched races in the last few years, we see the first comfort stops occurring. Once the Maglia Rosa does that, then it will be gone. I think that is a minute and a half. So we look ahead. The Muro di Ca del Poggio is a really steep climb. We've seen it in a time trial in the last few years around Conegliano. And you're talking of gradients at points. It's only short, but at points you get up to 20%. Is that maybe a launch pad later on? Because if you're a sprint team, how do you control something on a gradient like that?
Well, sorry, Sean. Do you want me to start with this, Sean?
Yes,
I've got a little intriguing point to do. Ooh. So I had a look on VeloViewer.
Detective Blythe.
Detective Blythe is back once again with the lyrical master. Sorry. Yeah, it's 900 metres an average, and it does go up after it, but the steepest part, 900 metres at 11.2%. After they get to the top of the climb, let's not forget we've got sprint seconds on offer today, and they are 15Ks later. So for the likes of Bora, for the likes of Ineos, for Hindley and Carapaz, they might have a little nudge at just trying to get a cheeky few seconds today. And if there's ever a launch pad to do it with a full team and catch someone by surprise, maybe, it's a perfect little opportunity to do so, I think. That's it. That's all of my inspections done. Sorry, wasn't that interesting? Yeah, sorry.
Detective Blythe's findings for the day.
Detective Blythe's done it. Yep, thank you.
Well, I think with the distance from the finish, you know, with the Muro di Poggio, you know, 50 plus kilometres, I think 54 the exact, you know, it's a long ways. And the sprinters teams, they will, you know, position themselves on the front of the group going on to that climb, and then you have that sliding room, but you can go back through the peloton, and it is going to be difficult to cause any upset there, and you know, go that distance from the finish. And the climb is just that not long enough really to make gaps that you can maybe go all the way.
It looks as though we're settling into that pattern then. Just under 2 minutes now, 137 kilometres to go on stage 18 of this Giro d'Italia. Started today in Borgo Valsugana. Last time I had a race starting there was just over 10 years ago when Franco Pelizzotti was the man to win the national championships in Italy. I talked about there being a pattern. Look at this already. Not only has any sort of will and realistic opportunity to get over and join the breakaway happen, we've already got the sprint teams controlling this gap. They do not want to make that miscalculation here, and they'll already be extremely wary. Get the feeling that given who's in the break as well, they won't want to give them too much time today.
No, they'll not want to give them too much time, but I don't think maybe that is the immediate thought for the teams. They're just keeping a good pace here, leave it go out second by second, and that will calm as well the attacks in the peloton.
Right then, let's get into the peloton. We saw him a minute ago. Let's go and hear from him. Bradley Wiggins, buongiorno.
Okay, yes, we're just... Hello, everybody. Hello. We're just going through the peloton at the moment. We're on the wrong side, so you can't actually see anything at the moment. That break's on pretty easy, actually. Lots of riders stopping for a wee, and I think it's very, very welcomed day for a lot of people. I'm just trying to have a look at Mark here. Mark's there at about 6th, 7th wheel there. He's looking pretty good, actually. I did have a chat with Mark this morning. He's very, very tired, as most are probably in this race by this point. But, yeah, that looks like we're set for potentially a sprint day now. Quick-Step have made their intentions noted there. Groupama as well, so I think as it's gone as pretty much to plan, really. I think we're set for a big bunch sprint finish later on today. Other than that, not much else to report. Quite a few guys sitting down the back, the likes of Richie Port, etc., that had a tough day yesterday. I think today is a welcome day for a lot of people, but other than that, I will hand you back to the capable hands of our commentary team at Eurosport.
Thank you very much, Brad. Enjoyable day out there, riding down the valley. These big mountains will slowly disappear as we get through the day. They'll reappear tomorrow, though. and they won't disappear until the last day. One big line here, gap at just under 2 minutes. DSM are helping Quickstep and Groupama control things. And if you're just tuning in, then the big news today, I'm afraid, is that João Almeida is no longer in the race. Portugal have never had a Grand Tour winner. Joaquim Agostinho, the only Portuguese rider to have reached the podium in a Grand Tour. Agostinho finished on the podium at the Vuelta and twice at the Tour back in the 1970s. And João Almeida, well, he was in with a chance, wasn't he, of getting onto that podium, Adam, and it'll be a real disappointment for UAE today. Interesting that they haven't been at all towards the front to control things. It looks as though they'll rely on other teams, but we can probably count on Fernando Gaviria to have a good go at the end, can't we, to try and bring some joy for them.
Yeah, of course he is. He'll have a good go today. He's still in the race for this stage, I think. So he'll definitely have a little pop today, try and get up there. But the team that he's got around him, they don't need to stress. But by heck, they are pushing on here, Francis de Jure, aren't they? Conor Lovas on the front, setting the tempo. It's going to be a fast day. This already, what, 30 kilometres, 20 kilometres done now?
It just has the look, and please, guys, with all your experience, correct me if I'm wrong. Please feel free to jump in and do that straight away, so I don't talk any more rubbish. But you know what modern cycling's like? They sort of strangle these breakaways on days, and it's like they just don't want to take the risk. We're talking about some top-quality riders here, aren't we? Dries de Bont, former national Belgian champion, who almost on his own managed to hold off the peloton for nearly 50 kilometres the other day. Affini, who's one of the top time trialists in the world. Magnus Cort, who's said to get better and better as everybody else's legs get weaker and weaker in the third week. And then, I suppose, with all respect, the odd one out is Davide Gaburro, but he has so much experience of riding in breakaways. They probably just don't want to take a chance, these guys.
Well, we've seen that so many times in the recent tours, and they just allow it to, get 2.5, 3 minutes, and they start riding, and they just, block it at that and hold them there. And surprising that they started this early riding Konalovas. They're really pushing on. You can see the pace is very, very fast, and I think if it starts to come down under that, 2 minutes, they will probably knock it off a bit. If it goes to 1:30, they'll definitely slow it down a little bit and allow them to hang out there. And yeah, it's a real killer for the breakaway, because the slim advantage they give them in the very earlier part, still with 133 kilometres to go. If the break decides, okay, we'll just slow down a bit, well, then the peloton will do the same.
That's where maybe if you're in the breakaway here, you have to play it clever. Save something for later. Know that you're not going to be given more. 2 minutes then. Not much at all.
There is a little climb coming up, a little 2.2k climb, 5.6%. So they might just be squeezing on a bit, getting them a little bit closer. They can just roll up the climb a little bit easier, maybe. You can see the breakaway riders on the climb now. They might be doing
just over 2 kilometres, isn't it, as you said? Yeah.
It's not too bad, but I think Sean is exactly right what he was saying. That they're trying to keep them close, but I also think with the laps in Verona as well, that they'll want the sprint teams as many in their lead-out train as possible to hold position. So I think they'll try and keep it close, so that you have to use less riders to bring them back, rather than let it grow, let the gap grow, and then have to use more men to bring it back. So it then ultimately means you've got less men at the finish. So I think they're probably just keeping it close, so they've got strength in numbers towards the end of the stage.
Adam, I hope they don't go to Verona, because they're not supposed to be there until Sunday. Today's Treviso.
This is the one I meant. Sorry, guys.
It's just down the road, though. But yeah, maybe we are close to Verona, so maybe someone's getting excited. Nearly at the end.
Yeah, sorry, I'm getting as bad as Dan Lloyd here with his tennis comments. Sorry, Dan.
That will take some beating, that.
Well,
that will do, yeah.
As a rider out here, when you're in here for almost 3 weeks, and you know where the race is finishing, but you forget where you're going on some days, and you can mix up the cities you're finishing in. Yeah, it's a couple of days off before we get there, and there's a lot of more difficult days to come before we get to the finish of this one.
It's cruel, actually, isn't it? Because we go so close to Verona today, Adam. Just a few miles down the road. But then we go all the way up to the northeast into Slovenia, back up into the Dolomites again before coming back. So, yeah, it's like they're dangling the finish in front of the riders here. And like, well, a couple of days' time, the airport's just here, you better fly home. No, not yet.
That's exactly what I meant. We're close to it. Close to it.
Yep, Treviso today, the home of Pinarello. and quite a few other big cycling brands.
Campagnolo.
It is a mecca, isn't it? The whole Veneto region. There's a lot of little towns. But Treviso itself, yes, the home of Pinarello.
Ferrari.
We've been through that one already, Imola.
Lamborghini.
No, you're testing my motorsport knowledge now, which isn't very in-depth at all.
I'm just going to keep naming Italian things till I get something that's from Treviso. No, we've been through cheese country, haven't we, already? That was ages ago. Vespa?
No, is that Northwest Vespa?
No, I think we move on to the alcoholic drinks.
There we go.
Some of them are from this area.
Now we're talking.
It's usually Spritz o'clock, yes. And before we get there, we go to Valdobbiadene, which is the home of Prosecco, Adam.
Well, even better. Even better.
500 metres to the top here. And the chainsaw there would have scared them off. Gone a little bit quicker. Dries de Bont is the man at the front, the former Belgian champion. Last time we had a sprint stage, he was out there. And the one before as well, Reggio Emilia. That was the Parmesan day. Edoardo Affini just behind him. And this is the group. DSM and Groupama. Nice scenic little climb this. Le Scale di Primolano. Scale meaning stairs. There's a few lumps and bumps along the way. Not all of them categorised either. Actually, when we do get to Prosecco country, we're in the hills and there's 2 or 3 unclassified climbs there.
Well, we can see here the way the peloton are just you know, controlling and allowing it to just grow out a little bit, and you know, still keep the control on it here. And you know, these climbs are not going to be a difficult one for the peloton to control the group. And as you say, Rob, they're just you know, playing it, I suppose, tactically well, not allow the break to get too far, and then you should ride, you know, with much more men in the front, keep it at that 2.5 or 3 minutes, and it looks like they're going to keep it very tight today.
On a short leash. And that'll be maybe a more stressful start to the stage. But in theory, as you said, they should have to do less in the end, but all depends on how the break themselves react, Adam, as well, because if they know they're not going to be given more than 2 minutes, then maybe they can try and save something for the end.
Yeah, try and save something.
Not easy, is it?
No, it's really not easy at all. I think the breakaway's in a great position where, as Sean mentioned earlier, they could almost slow down and play with the peloton a little bit. They don't want to just keep pushing on for the sake of it. If they back off, the peloton will back off, especially now. So I think the peloton, if the breakaway, if they really do back off, the peloton will back off, and then it's just a case of choosing the point of when to then really push on hard and make it difficult for the breakaway, for the peloton chasing behind again. You want to let them think they're catching you, and then they back off at that point that they think they do, and then at that point, that's when you put the hammer back down and open up the gap quickly. But easier said than done.
What's the deal with the chainsaw? I don't get it.
I think it's just the noise. I think there's some people that just like that. I don't know. No idea. It was like the Vuvuzelas, wasn't it?
Yes.
Back in the World Cup.
Yeah. I mean, I just wondered if I'd missed a meeting or something there, because I just don't know.
Well, Inspector Blythe there did the work for you. It's the noise.
Get that magnifying glass out.
It's out already, I've got it.
Well, you always get those, I don't know what you will call them, but you know, they go out on the roadside and they have a bit of a competition between their friends and see how much airtime they can get during you know, a 3-week race, and then they go to the pub in the evening time. You see, I got 10 seconds on the on TV. I think that's probably, there is a lot of guys that do that. It's a sort of a competition.
A novel way of doing it. 2:03 over the top of the first of 2 classified climbs today, the gap. 129 k's to go. An active first 10 kilometres today on the way to Treviso. since calmed down. There's a real pattern to this race now. We've got 4 quality riders at the front of the race, 3 of them who have been very big names, certainly in one-day racing. Caught at the back here as well. He's had some good results in the Grand Tours. He's looking to try and win a Giro d'Italia stage to add to his many from the Vuelta and a couple from the Tour de France.
He's looking not to get caught today. Nothing? No? Right, OK, fine. I know Sean's giggling. Sorry, guys, sorry. Stay 18.
I appreciate the effort, Adam. I appreciate the effort.
It's no problem at all. You're welcome. You can have that one for free.
Yeah, Court's the man in the back with the pink helmet on. And at the front, 3 teams are interested in just keeping this on a tight leash.
See there, Bora as well, just about a third of the way down that pack, all in a line together. See Demar in the Ciclamino jersey, just a couple behind him. You've got all of Bora lining up. Do you think they'll go for sprint points today, Sean, for those seconds? Not sprint points, but seconds?
Well, I think it's going to be certainly an interesting one, depending on the situation, of course, when we get to that point. And, you know, the breakaway, if it's still, you know, that's 3 minutes out, well, then I think it's going to be a one where the break will sweep up all the bonification points at the intermediate sprint and the time bonuses. And yeah, I think there's a lot of the GC teams which would probably, you know, like that, and the ones who are up at the top of the general classification. It's going to be difficult, you know, with a bunch anyway. These guys that are in the fight to win this race, is always going to be somebody will make the sprint, and you know the riders will talk with each other and say, can you make that sprint a bit there, and don't allow them to take the time bonuses. So it's always a complicated one when it's an easy run to the intermediate time bonus point on the route today.
It's one to keep an eye on, though, and one that we'll be keeping our eye on in the last 50 kilometres of the day. First intermediate sprint comes in Valdobbiadene. It's another, 40 k's or so up the road yet. Now you imagine that most of those points should go to the breakaway. There's no need for anybody to pull the breakaway back before that at all, if they want to sprint at the end of the day. Just over 125 kilometres remain of stage 18 of the Giro d'Italia. Borgo Valsugana at the foot of the mountains into Treviso and the Veneto today. Tomorrow we go back into the hills and the mountains. Big day for Alessandro De Marchi tomorrow. They go through his hometown for the first intermediate sprint. Don't be surprised to see him fighting for the breakaway. And then on stage 20, the monster stage in the Dolomites, finishing at the top of Passo Fedaya. Sunday's the time trial in Verona. Today, there's been a change in the GC before even the pedal stroke, and it's through bad news for João Almeida. Portuguese was 4th at 1 minute 54 from Richard Carapaz's Maglia Rosa. A COVID positive and illness overnight has meant that he has had to leave the race. That means that Vincenzo Nibali's moved up to 4th place in the general classification. Everybody's shifting up one. And it's also meant that Juanpe Lopez has gone back into the white jersey lead.
I have just had a message on social media. The chainsaws come from the Italian MotoGP, which someone highlighted to me, motorbike racing, thank you. And it's the sound of the old two-strokes.
There you go.
So, yeah, that'll be it. Does that make you feel better about it, Rob?
A little bit better, yeah.
Good.
I'm all for it. I just didn't understand why.
No, as long as they take the actual saw bit off, it's fine.
Yeah, would be an idea, wouldn't it?
Yeah. There's the picture, wasn't there, last year of Egan Bernal climbing up to the top of that mountain when he attacked Solo, and there's just one guy looked like he was chasing him with a chainsaw. It was that sort of worrying point where he's at the top of the mountain, not many people around him, and there's a guy running at me with a chainsaw at the minute. Must have been a little bit disturbing.
It's not the most comforting sound, is it?
No.
Mind you, they're trying to will them on faster. Like I said, it might work.
That's true, but what is a comforting sound in bike racing? Adele at the side of the road. Yeah, the cheer when you've won. Adele at the side of the road.
The show when you finish.
It's also true.
Coffee machine on the bus.
No, not after the stage, Rob. Come on.
No, an espresso, yeah, it's just a cappuccino you can't have. No milk.
You can't have a coffee after the stage. You'd be wide awake.
Oh, I don't know.
All night.
I need a little kick.
Sat on your massage bed. Well, it's not sat, laying on your massage bed with your eyes wide open because you've had an espresso.
The problem is I have that many espresso, it probably doesn't have too much of an effect by now as we look at Lake Corlo. And a few spots of rain on the lens there. Thankfully, where the riders are, I think, it's still sunny. So with the shot we had. We don't need any more rain after yesterday.
Turned out all right. Sorry, it's turned out all right from there in the end, didn't it?
It did. I was just going to say, it got a lot better, didn't it, as the day went on. Bit of a metaphor, really, for Santiago Buitrago's day and crashing early on and then winning the stage. Just a word on him, 22 years of age, youngest Colombian ever to win a stage of the Giro d'Italia, 16th Colombian to take a stage. They've got 32 victories now, adding his name to a list that includes Egan Bernal, and he looked really good, didn't he, Sean?
Yeah, impressive. And the guys out in front were very impressive as well on that climb. And, you know, we had Van der Poel out there in front and Lemreza just a little bit off. He lost maybe, you know, 50, 60 metres maximum, but always held Van der Poel in his sights. And looked like that Van der Poel, for me, he was going to go all the way, and Lemreza was, you know, coming back. And then we see him coming back, and I was expecting the two of them to go over the top, and suddenly Van der Poel out of gas. And it's something we've seen with Van der Poel many times. He just rides and then suddenly he just goes bang, and you know, no more power left. And in the meantime, Buitrago was just slowly coming up, and I didn't think he was going to make it before the top because we were getting ever so close, and it just tells the steepness of that climb, the gradient at the top. And when Buitrago did catch Lemreza, you know, it was just 40, 50 metres, and he went over the top 10 seconds ahead because Lemreza just really blew. He had given it his all, and you know, what a race it was, you know, for the stage out in front. And then of course we see the battle between the GC men, a fabulous final to the stage yesterday, as it was all day. It was an exceptional stage, the way the racing, and you know, full gas racing all day.
And if he was going to win a Grand Tour stage when to announce himself, it had to be at the Giro, because he's got a great relationship with Italy. He's an excellent speaker of Italian, by all accounts. He did live in Italy for a while. He used to race with the Cinelli team when he was a youngster. A bit of a protege of Maurizio Fondriest, coached by Michele Bartoli. And he actually had one of the most worrying moments of his life in Italy. He was in a coma for 8 days after crashing whilst he was racing for Cinelli back in the day, and a long way from his parents who were over back in Colombia. So he suffered a bit on Italian roads in more ways than one, and it was nice to see him winning yesterday. And after the tears at the finish line on Sunday, delight yesterday.
Oh, these guys are going to have a hard day out.
He seems to love it though, doesn't he, Dries de Bont?
He does, yeah. I mean, you got to take your hat off to him. Alpecin have been brilliant this Giro. Yeah, he does love a bit of Feeney in there as well. I don't think he's been in any of the breakaways as of yet. We've seen him trying before, but I think this is his first day in the break, this Giro. He came very close. Do you remember the stage Nizzolo won?
Yes.
He went off the front doing a lead out. I forgot who it was for now, but he shot off the front in the last 300 metres. Big seated acceleration.
That one was in Verona, Adam.
Well, that's why I got confused, obviously. But yeah, super fast, brilliant lead out, man. And if you are in that breakaway, sat behind him now, that's the place to be.
Davide Gaburro's got the right idea.
It's funny though, isn't it? Because that is something that can make a difference. If you sit behind someone that is bigger than you, a lot bigger than you, as Affini is for most of those guys, you do get that little bit more shelter behind them.
Yeah, just imagine if you're behind Gaburro there and he takes his turn on the front. It's almost like having to do 1.5 turns, isn't it?
Exactly.
Here's Mark Cavendish, who has history in Treviso, by the way. He won here back in 2013. Looking for stage win number 17 down the years in the Giro d'Italia. And what will be his second of this Giro. First in Italy, because of course the one he won was in Hungary. And he of course today is the reason he's been trying to survive in the mountains. That's Monte Avena, and these are the vital statistics at the moment of Magnus Kort. Heart rate has settled down a little as they've settled into their effort. You can see when he's taking his turns, the up and downs. Already a day strain of 13.4. And a reminder, if you're new to watching our coverage, that it's out of 21 on the Whoop scale. That's the band that the riders are wearing on their wrist that measures all of their data, the heart rate. From that, they'll be able to see what skin temperature as well. There's other things measured through the heart rate. Measures your heart rate variability stats overnight. Tells you how fresh you are, how rested you are. Of course, all of that data helping not necessarily the riders, but the coaches look after their athletes around the world. Hola, Fernando. The last Giro d'Italia stage win for him at the start of the race in 2019. Issue after issue, injury after injury, and lots of illness thrown in since. But he's looked fairly good without winning. Made a couple of mistakes maybe, Adam?
Yeah, I think a bit of misfortune as well. We saw his gears there. The first stage that Damar won, he was stuck a couple of sprockets up by the looks of things. So we saw him banging the bars after. He came close. A few days later, didn't he? Ran second again, looked like he almost had it, and then got rolled on ride by the DSM rider there, Dainese. So it was, he's there or thereabouts, but he'll be, I'm sure, well, as most sprinters, they'll be desperate to win today and believing that they can, but he's been so close that he's got to win soon. Well, it's the last chance this race to win, but in the races after it, you'd think if he holds on to this form, he will do, but I'm sure he'd love to win today.
Well, Bardiani, the only one of the invited Italian teams to make it. Dronoper not able to filter into today's breakaway. Of course, Mattia Bais has more or less got the Fuga classification wrapped up now, you'd say, because the breakaways that will likely go in the mountains will be bigger than 10 riders, you'd imagine, and they're the ones that don't count. And today, realistically, the last chance to score points and kilometres in the breakaway classification. Of course, 1 point for every kilometre spent in the breakaway. But that breakaway has to be lower than 10. There's Magnus Kort. No Danish stage win at the Giro in 10 years now. Lars back the last in Florence. Kort looking to add to those wins in the Vuelta and the Tour, as I mentioned earlier in the day. And EF Education Easy Post looking for their win at this Giro. Of course, they won the last couple of Giri, haven't they? They've had very good results here in the last couple of years. And they've been trying and trying with Hugh Carthy. Getting close, but not close enough so far.
Just to show how evenly matched this Giro has been, you've got Carapaz and Hindley within 3 seconds. And I think it's Hugh Carthy who is in 10th place on overall, but he's at 17 minutes. Crazy how those two at the top are still so evenly matched after so much racing.
Yesterday was the shortest gap before stage 17 since the 60s. See how it develops towards the weekend. Well, things have developed another few kilometres down the line, Sean, and it does look like what we were talking about with that short leash and control is staying true, isn't it? Look, just nothing more than 2 minutes, hardly.
No, and we can see out front they are riding quite strong, and you know, the brake is pushing on quite well, and the peloton is also doing the same, keeping it at you know, that maximum of it went you know, a bit more, but now they're pulling back a bit here, and it's going to be like that. It will come down maybe to 2 minutes, then it will grow out to, you know, 2:45, maybe even 3 minutes. They can slow it, and they can afford to do that. We can see, you know, the number of teams riding on the front here, as expected, the ones with the big sprinters left in this race, and they're not going to leave the opportunity slip at all here today. And you could see that right from the start. It was really controlled by the sprinters teams, trying to just allow a small breakaway, and they've done that now and just keep on working here. And yeah, we can see they're having a little bit of a chat up here. I don't know what it's all about, but Yeah, it could be that, you know, the advantage they're being allowed, maybe they're not happy with it, and maybe it's the front are slowing down a bit, but it looked like Magnus Corte was putting in a big effort on the front there a moment ago, but we'll just see now what way this gap will go, whether it you know, start to close down or will it grow out. But the peloton will immediately, when they know that, you know, they're getting too close, they'll have them in their sights, and they don't even need instructions from the DS, the riders that are on the front. They will see out in front what's happening. They'll just slow it down a little bit.
It's an interesting that one, Adam, isn't it? Because like, if Dries de Bont gets fed up here, he could do a Juan Antonio Fletcher and almost cause chaos by saying, all right, if you don't give us any more time, we're not going to ride anymore.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it, and he's quite right to do so, I think. Just back right off. I think these guys, you know, they're just working hard at the front to try and bridge that gap out. So you need to play with the peloton a little bit, play some tactics, get the peloton to slow down, get them to speed back up again, all that kind of stuff. I think the breakaway is ultimately controlling and dictating the speed of this, and we saw how Iolo Cometa riders wanted to get in there, a few other riders keen. So if the peloton keeps chasing as they are and the other guys just back right off, the peloton will have to back right off, because if they don't and they bring them back within touching distance, that's when you're going to get more attacks. So the peloton is in a great place, but they're not, these guys are not just going to keep riding hard for a long time just to keep a 2-minute gap or whatever it might be. They'll back off to make their life easy. They'll cruise along at an easier speed and then get on the gas, rather than just sit at this high tempo that's ultimately harder for no reason at all.
Keep an eye on that. We're going to welcome back our television viewers in a minute, and when they do, I want to ask you guys a few questions about who's riding here. Welcome back, everybody. 114 kilometres to go. 2 minutes and 6 seconds. We just saw a little discussion between Dries de Bont, as we see the home of quite a few of the sports makes. Said we were coming into the area. But Dries de Bont was chatting with Eduardo Affini, and it looked as though they were talking about maybe knocking it off. Here it carries on, wanting a bigger advantage, wanting to maybe play with the peloton, as Adam was saying, and make them give them more time. Otherwise, there's a danger if they knock it off completely, come back together, and it's chaos again for those sprinters teams controlling. Those sprinters teams controlling, we've got Groupama and Quickstep, which are fairly obvious. DSM have been riding as well. UAE have put one man up there with Rui Costa. I'm not sure if he's coming through and taking his turn at the minute, but there's also a couple of riders from Israel Premier Tech in that line as well, Sean. What are they doing there?
Well, I don't know, are they riding? Are they just sitting there up front? And I would expect them just to be on the front of the peloton, not contributing. Why would they ride? And we didn't see him very active at all this morning, but I think there's some of the riders here that still feel that they can do something in this race, but today wasn't going to be the day, and they just did not even try. And tomorrow is a day where in the earlier part you could get into the breakaway, and we've seen in the last days these very difficult mountain stages. If you make the breakaway, you could go all the way, and I think that's the reason that teams are thinking, yeah, let's rest up for tomorrow and not have a go today. Yeah,
change to that, because UAE Emirates Rui Costa is coming through and taking his turn now. But the rider from Israel, Demarque, is just sitting behind the four, and given their main sprinter Nizzolo's gone home, I just wondered even what they were doing, having a man up towards the front there.
Rick Zabel, maybe.
Rick Zabel left, yep.
Might have a little
Keep an eye on that. One man we do expect to sprint. He's been the best sprinter in the race so far. Arnaud Demar was talking to us at the start of the day.
Arnaud Demar, vous estimez à combien de pourcents la chance d'avoir un sprint à l'arrivée
aujourd'hui? What's the chance to have a sprint today? How many percents?
On est tous fatigués, hein. C'est vrai que voilà, c'est la.
We're all tired.
Ça fait longtemps qu'on n'a pas eu de plat justement.
It's been a long time since we had any flat, really.
Ouais, ça va être encore difficile pour nous de
contrôler
really
les échappées. To try and control the breakaways.
Circonstances, mais ouais, c'est clair que là, la fatigue elle est présente.
The fatigue's present throughout the breakaway and the peloton, so we'll see.
Vous parler du final. Les 5
You're talking
derniers
about
kilomètres, il n'y
the
aura pas de
sprint.
grande difficulté. Il y
What
aura
about
un
the
dernier
finale
kilomètre
today? Not too
complètement
many
plat avec,
difficulties,
la
really. The last
grande route.
climb,
Ouais,
50
voilà, les
k's to
50
go.
derniers kilomètres sont
Yeah,
plats. Après, il y a un
50
circuit
k's
final,
to the finish of
où on va
flat. It's
passer une
good.
première fois sur la ligne, donc ça va être la
Of course,
première
we're going to
sur
go
le
to a
Giro, on va
circuit.
pouvoir justement voir un peu
So we're going to
comment
be able to have a
l'arrivée.
look at what
Et
the
puis après,
finish is like
voilà,
actually when we come through the finish
c'est
line.
faire le sprint le mieux possible et puis
And it's just
et puis,
about doing the sprint the best possible after that.
Pratiquement 3 semaines qui ont quand même été
What's your
éprouvantes.
chance of winning
Forcément,
after a couple of a
on est
week really in the
fatigué,
mountains? Well, we're
on
really,
arrive
really
à bout de
tired.
ce Giro, même s'il n'est pas encore terminé, parce qu'il y a,
Of course, we're going to go to the end of the Giro, even if it's not
Et
finished
voilà,
yet.
aujourd'hui, c'est une opportunité qui
Today's
pourra
an
être
opportunity,
là pour
though,
nous, donc,
and it could be
non,
one for
après,
us.
Physiquement, ça va, je m'en. Ouais,
Physically,
je me sens bien, mais,
I feel
mais voilà,
well, I
c'est
feel
forcément, on est
good.
tous fatigués.
J'allais
But
vous
we're
demander,
all
est-ce que
really,
vous
really
pensiez pas
tired.
aller moins bien? Parce que après les arrivées des étapes de montagne, vous disiez non, on avait un bon groupe et finalement dans le gruppetto, ça a été.
Of course, it was a good gruppetto going in the mountains.
Bah, c'est forcément, faut faire les kilomètres, faut se taper le dénivelé.
You've got to do the kilometres. You've got to stay in the race.
C'est difficile, mais j'ai connu pire.
Of course, it's
C'est
still
par
difficult,
rapport
but I
à
think I
mon-
coped
à
quite
mon échelle à
well.
moi, j'ai connu pire dans le gruppetto.
I've seen
j'ai
worse
connu des
actually in the
journées beaucoup
gruppetto
plus
and in
difficiles
Grand
sur
Tour, so
certains
it's been
grands
okay so far
tours.
actually.
Et là, voilà, ça va par rapport à mon échelle de forme et mon échelle de difficulté, mais bon, ça reste.
I think on my scale of difficulty actually, it's been all right.
On est éclaté quand on arrive au petit
But we're still tired. There's a lot of
voilà,
fatigue.
faut y retourner. Il y a une étape, et puis aujourd'hui on va.
And of
on a
course,
un terrain
well,
qui
there's a
est fait pour
stage
nous,
for us
donc on va
today,
essayer de bien jouer.
and we're going to try and do
Ce
it
soir
and
pour
play
la
well.
quatrième peut-être. Merci Arnaud.
Chance for the fourth, maybe, Arnold. Well, they'll be hoping to keep things controlled. Just while I was translating Arnold Demar there, Adam, we saw the rider from Jumbo-Visma on the radio again, Eduardo Affini, and I just wonder what the rhythm's like in that group again now. There's been another conversation going on with the Bont there.
Yeah, I think him and Affini are probably just saying, look, why are we riding so hard? We don't need to ride this hard. Let's back off, get the peloton to back off, because it doesn't make a difference to them what speed they ride at, really. If they're riding, well, it does make a difference, sorry. If they're riding hard, they're not going to have as much energy towards the end. They're not going to have the legs. There's obviously riders in the peloton that are sat on the wheels now getting that draft from them. So I think with that, they're probably just saying, well, let's back right off. The peloton will back right off with us. Let's save some till the end. And with 50k to go, when we get over the Muro di Cal de Poggio, let's just call it the Poggio, but not the San Remo Poggio, when they get to that point, then they can really get on the gas and try to open things up. But beforehand, there's no need for them to ride hard. So I can imagine that they're probably just discussing that, really. They've not gone in the breakaway for fun. They've gone to try and win the stage.
It does seem to have been a slowing of the rhythm at the front. Gap has been oscillating a bit more. The slowing down, speeding up that Adam talked about earlier on. And it makes sense, Sean, doesn't it? Again, why waste all that energy just to have the same gap as they would if they could slow down and be allowed the same gap?
Yes, and it's surprising we don't see it more in those races, because when the breakaway is out there in the very earlier part, you know, they're just allowed that 3-minute advantage, and then it's just capped at that. And you can see here definitely De Bont was talking with Affini there and saying, okay, we just need to knock it off a bit here. There's no point in riding this hard, because they're just going to leave us burden energy, and then in the end we have no chance. But you can see here the way they're in the peloton. You just wonder what Costa's doing here, because he's really pushing on here, and yeah, it's going to come down if they continue on like that. And you have to play that game with them and just you know, make the peloton just slow it down a bit. And you know, out front with the 4 riders, you have to try and conserve as much energy as possible, and still, you know, 110 kilometres to go. It's not a force, but we do not see it often, and it's surprising we do not have it more.
It's all part of the tactics, as you say, isn't it, Adam? And it's a way of being stronger at the end, and it maybe being a bit more of a fair fight.
Yeah, I guess so. But this doesn't look like a fair fight at the minute. I mean, Rui Costa is going bonkers on the front there. He's riding flat out.
Riding into town. He's cut off 20 seconds since Sean began his answer there.
I don't understand why he's doing it, though.
That is fascinating. It's obviously a thing since we've seen, you know, this talk about the gap, because we've seen the conversations again now, the bonds on the radio. Normally, in this situation, you're going to see guys settling in, working hard, riding through, and behind a continuous tempo. But we've done almost 47 kilometres in the first hour. A lot of it's been downhill, granted, but the gap's back down to a minute and a half.
And 47 kilometres in the first hour. Oh, that is too fast for a breakaway of 4 riders. You need to be going at a slower pace and, yeah, conserve energy, and that's the subject at the moment. What are they doing here? We know, I think, the breakaway, they've decided to knock it down a bit, but you can see here the splits have been appearing in the bunch because of course they're really pushing on, but you know, it's not going to go anywhere. It's all going to come back together again, and yeah, will they? We might see a surprise. They might close this one down altogether and we'll all start over again, but yeah, you'd be surprised that the sprinters teams want to do that. But this Giro and Giros, every year we seem to have lots of surprises.
I keep thinking back to that stage 1 by Damiano Cima. It's very similar. Remember, the gap was all over the place that day, and of course, you know, people worried about the miscalculation. In the end, it looked like it was coming back together easily, and the chase went to sleep for 5 kilometres, and that's it. They win the stage.
Yes, I think that was a breakaway, and then in the end, you know, the break, I think they worked it very well. They, you know, they rode at maybe 80-85%, and then in the end they really turned it on. They worked well together, and it worked out. And
look at this, Jacopo Guarnieri coming up, the boss, to have a very stern word with Rui Costa. Where are you going, mate? Because look at that, 1 minute 20, he's chopped 45 seconds off in one turn.
Well, he's probably... We said this the other day on the show, talking about riders that are daft, and that is a pretty daft thing that Costa's done there. He's just gone
even Nibali's come up to have a word now.
Yeah, that's probably one of the first times that Costa has actually been involved with a chase like this, so he probably just doesn't know what to do, and that might sound ridiculous. Robbie McEwen just highlighted it to me, saying he's never been involved in a chase like this, so not used to the dynamic, but it's fairly obvious what to do. Don't ride flat out.
Well, I don't think it's, you know...
No, Sean, go with it, go with it, go with it.
It's not a difficult one for any rider in the peloton here. You know the situation. They have the radio earpiece to the director sportif. You know the advantage the break have got. You can feel how the other riders are riding here. You can see, you know, James Knox coming to the front and just, you know, riding at a steady pace. But sometimes riders, yeah, they want to upset the race a bit, and you just never know what's happening. You know, you cannot read, you know, all the time exactly what the teams will do, but we can see there was a big discussion from the riders that want to control this one and want to allow this break to stay out there all day.
Jacopo Guarnieri, known for being one of the nicest men in the peloton, but there being the enforcer.
He probably said it politely. Very politely. But yeah, it's an odd one, isn't it? Just getting on the front for... If he brings it back, what is he going to do? What is the team going to do? They're not going to...
It's going to make it a harder day for the peloton, isn't it?
It is, but how does that benefit them?
Exactly.
I can't imagine what must be going through his head, why he thought that was the right thing to do.
Well, maybe he's a bit down today. You know, Rui, Joao Almeida going home. Maybe he was rooming with him. I don't know. He might be, you know, not feeling, because all this work they have done with the team there, UAE, and you know, you lose Almeida in that situation. He was going to, you know, be in the fight maybe for the podium still, although he lost a bit of time yesterday. I don't know what's going through.
I don't think he's got the feeling. Sean, you said he's not got the feeling. He might be feeling a bit down. I just don't think he's thinking.
Well, you would expect a rider that's, you know, at this point in his career, he's been in there, he's won great races. I think he
world champion.
He should know, you know, the role here, how to do it. If he's never had to do it before, and I don't think it's a case of never having to do it. He's, you know, been in a situation where he must have had to ride and control. But it's a real funny one. It's hard to, you know, read from it what he was doing there, because he was really riding full gas, and just sometimes just to pee off the rest of the riders in the race, maybe you just do those things.
Well, he certainly achieved that aim, hasn't he, as we saw. You could just see David de la Cruz shaking his head as well, the sort of guys who are desperate for a quieter day. GC guys coming up with pink jersey was even pulling up alongside then. I don't think he actually said anything, but maybe a look would have been enough from the pink jersey. Look at that, 1 minute 9 seconds. Headwind. Oh, Adam, here's our mate from Lancashire. There we go.
Would you pack it in with Lancashire? Crikey. I mean, it's the wrong side, Rob. You know that Yorkshire's nicer. It's a lot nicer. That's why you always go over that way.
Into Feltre, which is, thankfully, for the residents of Feltre, a long way from both Lancashire and Yorkshire. A little bit of a headwind there on that flag as well. The report is that it's headwind for most of the last couple of hours of the day today.
Slight crosswind as well, I think. Only a slight crosswind. The wind is coming from the side for the riders for that last sort of 50k. It's only 8k an hour, so it won't make too much of a difference. But yeah, they have got a headwind, which is obviously not affecting them too much. But I just can't believe this gap has come down to 1 minute.
Well, the latest man on the front is Romain Combeau. He's the French rider who was in tears when his big mate Baldet had to leave the race. The most emotional interviews I've seen throughout the Giro. He worked well the other day, didn't he, to bring it back as well when there was that doubt. And there is that crosswind. It is changing, isn't it? It was headwind a moment ago, crosswind there. So, yep, good spot, Adam. Detective Blythe at it again.
Well, speaking of Detective Blythe, I'm going to go find some lunch, see what I can dig up. So I shall leave you guys to it, and I'll be watching for the rest of the day. Enjoy.
Thanks very much. I hope that there'll be something nice waiting for us when we step out in a minute.
Yorkshire pudding. Ta-da.
Thanks, Adam. There's Feltre, and that means we're moving into the Veneto. Just over 50 kilometres in, a third of the stage done. It's going along quickly. 1 minute 4 now. Again, the conversations continue here. Court and Affini.
Yes, well, they're definitely having quite a lot of chat here in the breakaway, and yeah, 1:07 back to the main peloton, and they're trying to play this game here, knock it back a bit, and the peloton is going to have to do it as well. And unfortunately, this is going to slow things down and make the day a bit longer.
And the team cars are now getting pulled out the gap. That's interesting. Certainly doesn't have a strong look about it now. It almost looks like they're soft pedaling relatively to what they were doing.
Yes, it does, and it's surprising the team cars are pushing out ahead, because normally they're pulled over and meant to go to the side of the road. But yeah, they're going ahead, and probably an opportunity maybe just to go ahead and give some fresh drinks up there. But yeah, it's a one that we do not normally see. And when you're in the breakaway, of course, you have access to the cars because you just call it up there, and the car comes up beside you. You can get fresh bottles, but it looks like the cars are being pushed ahead for some reason.
Keep an eye on that. Just 900 metres between the front of the race and those behind. Team cars have just been pulled out of the gap. 1 minute 22. You're watching stage 18 of the Giro d'Italia. Strange atmosphere about the race. Chase maybe not timing things well. A few people getting upset in the peloton, and those in the breakaway getting upset as well. 4 riders are up the road. We've had 3 in the commentary box. We've got an exchange. 1 has left. Adam Blythe gone off for his lunch. Dan Lloyd's joined us. And Dan, before we get to business today, I was given a wonderful copy of a brand new book that's coming out. GCM presents The Complete Fan's Guide to Pro Cycling. I opened it, and it fell open, actually, on page 30. I'm talking of falls. You were staring me in the face. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
Don't put people off the book immediately, Rob. We've only just released it.
I was trying to get them into it. I mean, if you want to see Dan Lloyd, poor old Dan Lloyd, he looks like he's despairing there. in the 2011 Tour of Qatar. I can't wait to read it, Dan. How are you anyway?
I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, it's a book which has something for everybody, I think, if you're a cycling fan, whether you've just got into the sport and you'd like some more explainers of the basics of why things happen when they do and why people might be using certain tactics en route, right through to stuff for the avid and long-term cycling fan who might want a few extra details, written by Peter Cossins, who's been writing books on cycling for a very long time, so he knows what he's talking about.
Yes, one of the most experienced cycling authors out there, Peter Cossins. I look forward to delving in. I know Sean was flicking through the copy. A good few pictures of him in there as well. There's plenty of articles from some of the top writers in the sport and a lot of the top pros as well. So a complete fan's guide to pro cycling out now, presented by GCN, written by Peter Cossins. Meanwhile, also available on GCN+.
They said you need to have an operation and basically never recovered from it. My new life started that day.
Do you miss racing?
It's different, so change perspective. But you can always talk, you know, what if that crash didn't have happened? What if I would have won 5 Tour de France's, I don't believe I would be happier today, you know.
Dan Lloyd went and chatted with a cycling legend. Andy Schleck, how was it, Dan?
It was really interesting. He was such an open and honest person throughout that documentary, and both on camera and off, and revealed quite a lot about how it felt to suddenly have to retire at what was a very young age. You'll remember it was late 20s that Andy Schleck had to retire from the sport due to the injuries that he'd sustained and couldn't get over, and such a talented rider as well. And I think it's just always interesting to see what any rider does, particularly high-profile riders like Andy Schleck, immediately after they finish cycling, because you're always just in this bubble. You might have people say to you, look, you need to think about what you're going to do next, particularly if not one of the high earners in the sport. But I always felt like if you take your eye off the ball and start really thinking about what's next, it makes a hard sport even harder to concentrate on. If you spend yesterday, for example, when you're in the clouds at the start, we all saw those solemn faces in the tents, and you've got half an eye on what's coming next, it makes it even harder to get through those very hard training rides or stages or races that you're faced with each and every year. And so it's just interesting to see what Andy, or hear what Andy said he did immediately after having that really tough press conference where he was in tears announcing his retirement. Took himself off to Mallorca for a few weeks just on his own to collect his thoughts, away from his family and away from his friends, to decide what he did want to do next. And I won't give too much away in case you haven't watched that documentary just yet. It's available on GCN Plus, along with a whole host of other legends of the sport that we've been to visit over the last couple of years.
And Dan, did you catch anything?
I caught a miniature fish right at the end of our time at the Schleck's Pond that they bought together many years ago. So I was quite content with that, because I'd been there for a few hours and I thought I was going to not catch anything.
No sharks then?
Nope, no sharks at all.
Well, we've seen one towards the front of the bunch, haven't we, today? Having a word with Rui Costa just behind Jacopo Guarnieri. What's your take on how things have developed?
Well, it was strange, wasn't it, to see Rui Costa increase the pace in the way that he did and bring it down to the point where they took the team cars from between the gap of the main peloton and the group of riders up the road today. So I'm presuming that Vincenzo is just basically asking him what he's doing. I mean, he's not a rider short of experience, Rui Costa, is it? So he presumably did know in his head what he was doing. I don't know what that was, but certainly they've taken the pace back slightly and allowed the gap to extend.
Well, we're off to the chippy to see if we can catch something a little bigger for lunch, and we'll see you a little later on.
Enjoy your cod. Yes, we'll see you later on. Cheers, guys. So we're under 100 kilometres left of today's stage. The last opportunity for the sprinters in this race. They've been hauling their bodies over the high mountains for what seems like an entire week. It hasn't been quite that long, but the last 2 days certainly. The 2 days from the weekend into Torino, and the brutal stage that we had again on Sunday, for the sprinters at least. And it was all for this. And it's not just the sprinters themselves who had to do that. If you look down the list of riders representing Groupama FDJ in this particular race, barring Attila Valter, none of them are what you could describe as climbers. Dimar, their main sprinter. Clement Davies done an awful lot of work on the front over the course of this race. Garnieri, Konovalovas. No, it was Konovalovas, I'll get that right eventually by the end of this Giro. Ludvigsen, Skotsson and Sinkeldam, all of those riders have been getting themselves through the mountains for this day to lead out their sprinter Arnaud Démare for a potential 4th stage victory. So unsurprisingly, they are one of the main teams who are doing the controlling work on the front of the peloton today. It is a strong breakaway though, as Rob Hatt, Sean Kelly and Adam Blythe have been pointing out since the point it went up the road earlier this morning. I wasn't expecting any really big names, Robbie, to head up the road this morning, but we have got, well, 3 really big names, I would say. Dries de Bont, incredibly strong. Magnus Cort, multiple Grand Tour stage victor. Eduardo Affini, one of the strongest time trials and rouleurs in the world right now, as well as Gabura of Bardiani CSF. Were you expecting that?
I was actually expecting more riders to have a go at getting in the break today, or at least seeing a bigger group get up the road, as this is the final roll of the dice for a lot of riders in this Giro peloton. Now, those who aren't able to win a bunch sprint or a time trial, and that makes it surprising to see Affini up here doing this. I thought he'd maybe have his eye on the final time trial. Maybe this will just sap his energy a bit, but sometimes you just got to go. A little bit surprised to see Magnus Cort in this situation. He hasn't really got the out-and-out speed to beat the purest of sprinters left in this race, but I thought on a day like today, probably the best chance for him to get a result is wait for the bunch sprint and maybe even launch a long-range attack sprint on the circuit that they'll finish on this afternoon in Treviso. So it's a bit of a strange one. I agree. It's an eclectic group. Although Magnus Cort, we were just talking about it earlier before we came on air. He had quite an incredible day yesterday in the mountains. He was still there when the group was down to about 16 or 18 riders, and he was still on the back of the group of favourites in the mountains. It was quite incredible. But here's the other thing, and I've just been doing a bit of searching, and you saw a few little raindrops on the camera lens.
Yes.
There's quite a substantial, I won't call it a storm, but heavy showers, sort of rain cell moving towards Treviso, due to get there about the same time as the riders do. So we could see a wet final circuit at the end of this stage, and that could throw the race wide open to attacking people not taking part in the sprint that you thought might, because of what can happen on the wet roads. So it's far from a done deal how this stage is going to pan out.
That could potentially throw a cat amongst the pigeons, as we sometimes say. Yeah, they enter the circuit with 22.2 kilometres remaining, Robbie and Rob's favourite number. And the circuit itself is around 13 kilometres in length. They don't quite do the full 2 circuits, but around 1 2/3 around the city of Treviso. So that would make things very interesting if indeed it does rain, either before they get there or whilst they're on it. Juan Pedro Lopez, who is now back in the white jersey. It's not on his shoulders literally just yet, but courtesy of João Almeida having to pull out of the race due to a COVID positive, Juan Pedro Lopez sits in 8th overall as things stand, and in the white jersey is the best young rider. Not particularly difficult for him right now. 130 heart rates, just cruising along at not much above recovery pace in terms of the effort he's exerting right now.
Talking of that final circuit, Dan, I'm also just looking at how it's set up, and it's not exactly a criterium style finish they're going into today. As you said, 13-kilometre circuit, and there's maybe 9 turns on the circuit itself, so it's not that complicated, and the last kilometre is straight ahead. So in terms of how technical it is and that being able to split up the peloton, I don't think that's going to be a big factor. I think the weather, if it comes in, will be the biggest danger that they face this afternoon.
Well, Rui Costa's been allowed back onto the front of the main peloton now. Will he bring the gap down again? We'll see. So with 96 kilometres to go, it means that we have 13 kilometres until the first intermediate sprint of the day. I'm not expecting much of a fight from the breakaway or indeed from the main peloton behind, because although there are points from first down to 8th place in the Ciclamino Jersey competition. With 4 rides up the road, it means there are only 4, 3, 2 and 1 points remaining for the riders in the bunch. And since Arnaud Demar sits on 238 points, which is 117, should I say, more points than Mark Cavendish in 2nd place, there's not really a whole lot to go for unless Gaviria is interested in moving himself up from 3rd place in that competition to 2nd. But I think they're all going to sit back. They're all waiting for the final sprint today, the final sprint of the whole race, because we have 2 more mountain stages to come and then a final time trial in Verona this coming Sunday. And on the subject of that final time trial, do you remember, Robbie, when Primož Roglic was leading the Tour de France? And I think it was that race where we didn't have a time trial for a long time, but he was in the yellow jersey for quite some time. Must have been a couple of years ago in 2020, I guess. When he was warming down ahead of the podium celebrations and the press conference, etc., he was always warming down on a time trial bike, because he wanted to make sure that he was still used to being in a very different position to what he was on the road bike, so that when it came to the last or the penultimate stage of that year's tour, it didn't feel too alien to him. I've not seen Carapaz or Jai Hindley, who aren't time trial specialists, warming down on their time trial bikes. Do you think they should be?
I think that the best way to warm down, if I'm looking at physiologically, I would think you should warm down in the same position that you have been using your muscles all day. That if you come out of a mountain stage on your road bike and then jump straight onto a time trial bike in a very, very different position, I think you're actually not really warming down the muscles that you've, and in the way you've been using them predominantly.
So maybe Roglic was just doing some extra training then, was he?
Maybe just trying to get himself used to being on the time, to just spending every available minute to be on the time trial bike.
That's my point, really. I mean, even if it doesn't serve the purpose of the cool down that they'd hope it would do, when it looks like there's a possibility it's going to come down to your performance on a time trial bike on the final day of this race to win a Grand Tour outright, I just wonder whether that should be in the back of your head, and that you should try and get yourself used to being in that position so it doesn't feel so alien on that last day.
Yeah, and maybe without riding the time trial bike before they get to that final day, and then do their entire day, their warm-up, their course recon and everything on the TT bike. Maybe even more important than spending a few minutes on it post-stage warming down could be just keeping up your stretching routine to make sure your body is ready and elastic enough to get onto the time trial bike and be in that position. Because it, as you said, it is such a different position on the bike. And okay, yes, you're using the same muscles, but you're using them at different angles. They're loaded differently. And if you don't do plenty of training on your time trial bike and you only ever pull it out when there is a TT, they feel absolutely foreign underneath you. But for those guys, if I was their team director, I wouldn't be saying, let's get the time trial bike out and warm down on that. But certainly do all the other things that you think can help you just slot straight onto, like the stretching, as I mentioned.
There's our stage profile, and that's where we are up to. There's an unclassified climb coming up very shortly indeed. After that, not far until the intermediate sprint, located at just over 83 kilometres to go. And then a fairly long descent by today's standards at least. Flat road, another unclassified climb, and then the second of the 2 fourth category climbs today, the Muro di Chadel Poggio, which is, as the Muro word suggests, a bit of a wall. 19% the maximum gradient at the foot, and there's another section of 16% towards the top. Overall, just over 1.1 kilometres the length of it, and a 12.3% average gradient. However, despite the severity of it, albeit for a short period of time, it comes with 54 kilometres to go. So whether or not we'll see any kind of action from the main peloton remains to be seen. I'm a little bit doubtful. Just at the back of the main peloton, we caught a quick glimpse of Mathieu van der Poel there of Alpecin Fenix. Just had a question in from Chris Jepsen. Do you know who got the most combative rider award yesterday? No info on the Giro website. Well, the answer is Mathieu van der Poel, and he's got the red numbers on, courtesy of winning the most combative award on yesterday's stage. Unsurprising, really, that he got it. given that he had another day out, which surpassed my expectations, even of Van der Poel himself.
Mine too.
Didn't quite manage to pull off a Wout van Aert from last year's double ascent of Mont Ventoux, but nevertheless, the way he rode yesterday was thoroughly entertaining, I think, for all of us as fans, whether you like Mathieu van der Poel or not. Lit the race up, and for a long time, on that final climb of the day, looked like he might carry off what many people thought would be nigh on impossible, given the group of climbers that he was in throughout most of the stage.
Like him or not, I challenge anyone to find somebody who doesn't like Mathieu van der Poel.
Maybe just the most ardent Wout van Aert fans. Well, it's pretty relaxed everywhere at the moment, not just in the main peloton for those not working, but also in the breakaway up the road. Adam Blythe was talking about this earlier. No point, really, in pressing on when you know that the big sprinters teams are all going to peg you at a maximum of 2 minutes advantage up the road. So they'll be doing the age-old trick of just going very steady, probably until they get to that second categorised climb of the day, then hoping they've got enough energy left to really press on and put the sprinters teams in trouble behind. It's a real catch-22 for the sprinters teams though, Robbie, isn't it? Because they'll be well aware that these 4 riders, all very strong, will potentially be doing that later in the stage. So I guess the idea could be that you bring the gap slower knowing that that's going to happen, but if you bring the gap closer before a climb, a few riders in the peloton are going to think, I might be able to make my way across to this if I attack now, so they're going to have to leave it about where it is at the moment.
It is a fine balance, and that's why for a very long time they were looking to keep it at about the 2.5 minute mark until the Rui Costa turn, which brought it right down. They've let it just edge back out a little bit now to just over 140, but they'll be content with this gap. But exactly what you said, you want to keep it close enough that if the breakaway decides from that last steep climb of the day, that's where they go 100%. You don't want to have to chase down too much, and like you said, if you get it too close, it could lure riders out of the peloton, go on the attack and try and springboard their way across to this group and join them, and then you have a problem on your hands if you're a sprinters team.
I cannot imagine how devastated the sprinters remaining in this race would be if they didn't even get the opportunity to sprint for the win today, having got themselves through stages that do not suit them at all and suffering almost equally as much as the riders who've been winning over the last few stages of this Giro d'Italia. If there was a breakaway still away at the end, there would be a few miserable people.
Figuratively speaking, it'd be like watching their heads blow off their shoulders like when you've blown up a balloon but haven't tied it off and just let it go. That'd be the sprinters' heads just flying around off into the air and deflating. Imagine as a sprinter what you go through to make the time limit, the suffering just to stay in the race for this last opportunity and have it snatched away.
That said, both Demar and Mark Cavendish have said it's not been quite as hard as some other Grand Tours and particularly Giro d'Italia have been in the past in terms of trying to make the time cut. I think they were well inside yesterday, almost 10 minutes.
It's been quite generous.
Well, yeah, they extended it, didn't they, last Saturday into Turin?
Yeah, and even the stage to Aprica, Mark Cavendish came in at 53 minutes, comfortably inside the time limit. Tried to get towards it, and there's some people who still might struggle to understand. They listened to Mark Cavendish in an interview earlier. He said, you know, there's no point going 12 minutes inside the time limit. You can do it much more easily, and that was a lot of us sprinters was always the way I tried to do as well. You might be out there longer, you take longer to get through the stage, but your intensity level is lower. So even though you're riding for longer, you're using less energy, and you can use that in subsequent days to keep battling and stay in there.
Vincenzo Nibali and Fabio Fellini just making their way back onto the main peloton, having stopped for one reason or another. 54 pro wins in his career so far. Not had one, to the best of my knowledge, so far in 2022, but great to see Vincenzo Nibali somewhere near his best form. You look at the clouds in the distance there, and Robbie on his computer beside me is looking at the live weather forecast. Looks like we might well be in for some rain later on today. Well, we'll keep our eye on that, but in the meantime, let's have a word with Thomas de Gent, who spoke to us before the start of the day. Finishing is important, but you have such a huge lead in the De Gent classification. Has that been decided? Well, you've got to be careful. If I lose 30 minutes 3 times, then I'm 20 minutes behind him all of a sudden. But finishing I have to do anyway. The pride of finishing a Grand Tour I still have, so I won't be pulling out. Being tired is not a reason to pull out. What's the prize for winning the De Gent classification? Well, we've still got to decide that. I think the winner will be taken to a restaurant, so it doesn't really matter who wins, we'll be eating well. But the loser will pay. Hawaii pizza? I'll probably go to a snack bar. So it won't be expensive even if you do lose.
It's just the true Belgian. We'll go to the chip shop. It's whenever they're away in a race, the Belgians, their first reward to themselves when they get back home is straight down to what they call the frituur, the chip shop. And they get all those sort of side dishes and snacks that you really can't identify what they really are. It's something sausage shaped, but it's not a sausage. It's not sure if it's meat or something, but that's their reward. Everything deep fried, plenty of mayo on the side.
There's something very comforting and also quite appealing about simple food on a lot of occasions, though, isn't there? I'm certainly like that. In fact, as much as I like a very nice meal out every now and again, I almost equally enjoy a jacket potato with beans and cheese. My wife is determined that I only cook that every so often out of laziness. I genuinely like it. I do make a good salad alongside it. Anyway, back to the race. I'm getting off.
And apparently chili con carne.
Well, that was me being lazy because, yeah, my wife Lorraine and older son Ralph have gone off on a road trip around Europe. So they arrived in Belgium, incidentally, last night, and they're on their way to Germany.
Straight to the frituur?
My younger son had been treated to a meal at his gran and granddad's house, and so I only had myself to cook for. So I got a frozen meal on the way back. And I had enough leftovers for lunch today.
Oh, dear.
Diego Ulissi on the front now for UAE Team Emirates. Let's see if he does a better job at keeping this tempo steady than his teammate Rui Costa. So it's keeping around 1.5 minutes between our leading group of 4 riders. I'll just remind you all who they are. Magnus Cort Nielsen of EF Education Easy Post. Multiple stage winner at the Vuelta last year and in previous years as well. Bardiani CSF, the second division team from Italy, are represented by Davide Gaburo. Started the day in 55th place on GC, 2.5 hours down on Richard Carapaz in the overall classification. Eduardo Affini is even further down than that, 3 hours and 50 minutes. He's there for Jumbo-Visma, the 25-year-old Italian. And the last rider, Dries de Bont, the 30-year-old former Belgian national champion, who's at 4 hours and 11 minutes in the general classification. So only 4 kilometres now until we'll get to that intermediate sprint point in a place called, and I'll take a run up at this, Valdobbiadene. I think that's how Rob Hatch told me to say it this morning. It was also the finish town for stage 14 of the Giro d'Italia in 2020, which was just 19 months ago. An individual time trial that day, won by Filippo Ganna, ahead of his teammate Rowan Dennis. But it was also used as a finish of stage 3 of the 2009 Giro d'Italia. That stage being won by Alessandro Petacchi, ahead of Tyler Farrer. And I was in that race, and we did this climb of the Poggio, not the Milano Sanremo Poggio, but the one that they're facing today. I have no recollection of it at all. And I should do, really, because it's a very steep, albeit quite short climb. So this is the steady climb and falls flat, really, up towards that intermediate sprint. Takes them up to 252 metres above sea level, but there's not much in the way of elevation gain today, particularly when compared to the last few stages of this race. Robbie's not watching the race, he's just got a weather map open.
I'm just looking at how that's tracking, and it's actually already started raining in Treviso. It's quite a heavy rain cell. The good news is that cell will have passed over and moved away by the time the race arrives in town. It just depends what pops up behind it and what continues to come through. But at the moment, still riding on nice dry roads. And that gap is coming down again significantly, down towards just 1 minute in front. So it's like the break have really backed it off and said, do you really want to catch us? Because the peloton's got to understand what can happen. And that was the big discussion when Rui Costa did that big, long, fast turn. He actually split the peloton and brought the gap right down, and that's what he was being told in no uncertain terms by Jacopo Guarnieri, the lead-out man for Arnaud Démare. Looks like Costa then understood what was needed from him, which was much less than what he was doing. I guess saw Ulissi on the front and started coming down again, but it's like the brake just completely backed off.
We've done 3,000 kilometres. I say we. The riders have done 3,000 kilometres of this year's Giro d'Italia. So just 449.4 remain over the course of what's left of this stage and the 3 that are still to come. So 2 more days in the high mountains. Going over into Slovenia, incidentally, tomorrow before the final huge mountain stage, finishing on the... is it Madalana? I've got that wrong, haven't I? Marmolada.
That's the Marmolada, yeah.
On Saturday, and then that time trial into Verona on Sunday, where this race could well be decided at the rate things are going, as it so often seems to be at the Giro d'Italia. You always look at the severity of the mountain stages, the hilly stages and everything else in between, and look at a race that finishes with a time trial and think, well, what's going to be left to fight for there? It's going to be minutes between every single rider. Incredible how many times, at least 3 of the last 10 or 11 editions, the pink jersey has swapped shoulders on the very final stage, which has been a time trial here at the Giro d'Italia, and it could be the same this year. We'll wait and see.
It could be, but plenty of opportunity for gaps to open up. The Friday stage into Slovenia, quite difficult, but a short uphill finish. But the next day, on the Saturday, stage 20, from Belluno to Marmolada, the Passo Fedaya. They also go earlier in the day over the Passo San Pellegrino and also over the Passo Pordoi,
which is the Cima Coppi.
The Cima Coppi, the highest climb in this Giro, at 2,236 metres above sea level.
Is that where Richard Carapaz, who lives at altitude in Ecuador, going to come into his own?
I think it's too far to go from the finish. It comes at 123 kilometres covered, so with 45 kilometres to go, and the climb of the Fedaya, what they call the Marmolada, up to the finish in itself is a gradients of 10%, all the way up to the finish line. So I think that's the spot. If someone's going to do it, it's going to be there.
They really are taking it easy at the front. I say that, we had a graphic pop up not that long ago which showed that the average speed so far today has been 44.7 kilometres per hour.
Taking it easy.
I think that probably has slipped downwards in the second half of the first part of the race, if that makes any sense whatsoever, because it was a reasonably fast start and they were going full bore to establish a lead over the main peloton behind. But since then, they've collected themselves, throttled things back, and they're kind of playing with the peloton just as much as the peloton are playing with them.
Yeah, they'll be barely riding 35 kilometres an hour at the moment. Beautiful area to ride your bike. I've done a mini training camp here back in the day. I went to visit one of my sponsors at the time, actually, who still provide me with equipment, CD Shoes. A lot of the pros ride that brand, but I was up here and I went out training on a number of times with Matteo Tossato, who's now the team director of the Ineos team. He lives around this area, and just a beautiful area because you can ride out along the flats. You can have an easy day and ride on the flat, but you've just got these huge mountains also, you know, accessible to do your efforts and so forth on.
They're the ultimate places, aren't they, to go training, because if you go just to the Pyrenees or something, you only have one option really, unless you're on the very busy valley road that lots of cars use to get from A to B. Right, coming up towards the intermediate sprint then. As I said before, I'm not expecting a huge contest between these 4 riders because there's not a whole lot for them to gain out of this. None of them are up there in the Ciclamino points competition, and none of them are up there in the intermediate points competition either. Tagliani has led that pretty much from day one. In fact, I think he has led it from day one. Oh, here we go. Not Tagliani's teammate, but the Bardiani rider, Gaburo, is first across the line. And he made sure of that, didn't he? Next across the line, we had Eduardo Affini of Jumbo-Visma in the yellow there. Then it was Dries de Bont, who picks himself 6 Ciclamino jersey points up. And the last rider across the line there, Magnus Cort Nielsen of EF Education Easy Post. It's not quite at the halfway mark of today's stage. That comes with 78 kilometres to go on what has been a slightly amended stage. Originally, it was supposed to be 152 kilometres. Didn't read exactly what the reason was behind the change. Presumably some road work somewhere which meant a slight detour. Or maybe they just remeasured it. But either way, 156 kilometres the total distance for today's stage.
Or possibly moved kilometre 0 back towards the start, so instead of making them ride along the neutral, just get them underway a bit sooner, possibly.
Big Prosecco region here. I was reading on the Inner Ring blog earlier that they produce around 500 million bottles per year around this. I'll take a run up at this again. Valdo Biadena region of Italy. Up in the north, of course. And we're back into the Dolomites tomorrow, and like I said, over to Slovenia, albeit briefly. No Slovenians left in the race. The first departure from the 2022 Giro d'Italia was the only Slovenian in the race, Jan Tratnik of Bahrain, victorious. But despite their absence, I have a sneaky feeling that the fans are going to be out in force as we head into that country tomorrow. So the gap's gone up slightly, but I think basically it's going to be hovering around here for the majority of the rest of the stage. Of course, when they come into the last 20 or 30 kilometres, given the strength up the road and given that they haven't exactly been putting their all into it, they'll want to make sure it's down towards the minute mark, I'd say with 25 kilometres to go at the most. Because there's some serious horsepower in that breakaway. Once they really get rolling on those flat roads for the last 45 kilometres, could be difficult for them to bring it back. Big discussion going on here between Mark Cavendish and Arnaud Démare.
Just looking at the hand gestures there from Démare, is that sort of circling of the finger is like, are we going to work together and swap turns on the front?
Well, he sneakily rolled across the intermediate sprint point just in front of Mark Cavendish there. So Démare picks up 4. Adds a single point in advantage over Mark Cavendish, but there's not much left to fight for there unless Démare happens to have to go home for whatever reason, crash, illness, COVID positive, which has sent João Almeida home. If you've just joined us, he's pretty safe in the Ciclamino jersey, which is why they're chasing today, because 2 years ago, or at least the edition in 2020, Démare by this point in the race hadn't wrapped up the Ciclamino jersey competition despite having won 4 stages by this point, and so it was more beneficial to his team, which was Groupama back then as well, not to chase the breakaway for a sprint finish, because if a breakaway took a lot of the points, it meant that Démare, even if he had a mechanical problem or something went drastically wrong in the finale, he'd be more guaranteed of taking the Ciclamino jersey onto the end of the race than if they did bring it back and the worst came to the worst and he wasn't able to fight it out for points. So that's exactly what they did, and I seem to remember they didn't quite catch the breakaway that day, the other teams that were trying to chase it down. So a very different scenario today because he is so comfortable in the lead of that competition. Happy for his team to control it, happy to go for a 4th stage win here. Now, a rider that I picked this morning on the breakaway as my prediction for today's stage, Phil Bauhaus.
Good pick.
I hope so. Well, he was a fast finisher on the last sprint stage that we had, wasn't he?
Well, I picked him for that day.
Well, no, you said somebody from Bahrain.
I said someone from Bahrain because I had a mental block and I couldn't think of his name. I obviously wasn't thinking of Pello Bilbao or Mikel Landa for the bunch sprint. So someone from Bahrain, because it would not come to me. But he has also a history of performing well late in a race when fatigue has really set in. He won the final stage in Tirreno Adriatico this year. in San Benedetto del Tronto. Really good sprint. Strong headwind, manoeuvred his way through, found his way through a lot of traffic, came from a long way back and got the win there. And he was coming from a long way back on that stage that Demar ended up winning. Many of you will remember the tough chase that was all day long for the sprinters teams, and finally reeled the breakaway inside the last 500 metres.
Could well be something fairly similar today. Team cars keep going forwards and backwards in front and behind this breakaway today. Not sure why it took so long for them to slip back behind it, because the reason they would have been taken out is if the gap came down below a minute between these four and the main peloton behind, and it had almost done that a few kilometres ago, but rose back up as the peloton took their hands off the throttle behind and allowed the gap to rise once again. Ewan Wilson's written in asking whether you, Robbie, can describe the Flemish culinary treat of the Bicky burger to me. Apparently it's a staple of the friteur.
Again, mystery meat.
Mystery meat
should maybe come with one of those warnings on it that says may contain traces of meat.
Right. Sounds lovely.
Yeah, I haven't actually eaten one, and I never intend to.
Oh, also Tom Godek's written in saying, have you forgotten about Domen Novak? I have. Thanks for pointing that out. So we do have a Slovenian left in the race. I think this goes back to when I was looking at a provisional start list way before the Giro d'Italia, and specifically looking as to how many Slovenians would be here for when we visit their home country. And at the time, Novak wasn't on it, but then he was. So yes, we do have a Slovenian for the fans to cheer on as we go there tomorrow. Well, with the departure of Joao Almeida due to that COVID positive, it means that only 152 rides remain in the Giro d'Italia this year. Simon Yates, we all saw, didn't finish yesterday. It was all over social media, and we had a graphic for that as well. I didn't see until I saw the results after the stage that Arm van Alke of Lotto Soudal also pulled out of the stage yesterday. So Lotto Soudal down to just the 5 riders, because they've already lost Caleb Ewan and Rudiger Selig. So there aren't that many teams with the full complement of 8 riders left in this race, although probably more so than normal by stage 18. Ineos Grenadiers have got 8, as have AG2R. Another team is Yolo Kometsu, who've done well to get through with the full 8 riders. Groupama FDJ as well. And the final team of the 5 who've still got 8 riders is Trek Segafredo. And Juan Pedro Lopez, whilst he wouldn't have wanted to go into the white jersey the way that he has, with Almeida having to pull out, will be content to go to the podium at the end of today's stage, I'm sure. And he'll be wearing the white jersey, you would imagine, tomorrow, unless anything goes disastrously wrong. At the start of the day, it was Almeida who led by 10.5 minutes over Lopez, with Taman Allensman almost 7 minutes adrift of that. And then Santiago Buitrago in 4th place in that competition, so he'll of course move up to 3rd. And Buitrago, incidentally, I read yesterday evening, is the youngest ever Colombian stage winner at the Giro d'Italia. And it's something that over the last few years can almost pass you by. You say to yourself, 22 years of age, well, Pogacar had already won the Tour de France by that age, so it's not that young. And sometimes you have to say to yourself, that is still really young to be winning stages of a Grand Tour. And it's the same for Lame Razor, who finished 2nd on yesterday's stage, also just 22 years of age. However, although he's not the, although he is the youngest Colombian rider ever to win a stage of the Giro, not the youngest stage winner this year. That accolade still remains of Biniam Girmay, who's just a few months his junior.
Here's one for you, Dan. You gave me that very interesting question about Belgian culinary delight available at the Friteur. Here's another one that's race related. I just read it and I thought, I'll tell you my thoughts afterwards. But do you think Carapaz could relinquish the leader's jersey by just a couple of seconds so he can wear his own Ineos skin suit in the final TT? The reason being that it's aerodynamically optimised for him and probably of a higher aerodynamic quality than what he'll get from the organisation. That's from Richard Dawson. I don't think he would do that because it's just too dangerous. It's just playing with fire is too big a gamble to do. What do you think?
I'll let you know in just a second. We're waiting for a TV viewer to come back from a commercial break. So, we've been discussing the prospect of Richard Carapaz deliberately losing the leader's pink jersey on stage 20 by the minimal amount possible, so that he could potentially use his Ineos Grenadiers skin suit on the Sunday individual time trial around Verona. Why would he want to do that, I hear you ask? Well, an awful lot of time and money is spent on making sure that the rider's equipment is as aerodynamically optimised as possible, and a large part of that is the skin suit, because it's your body that takes the most wind. We hear lots of stuff about how aerodynamic a wheel or a frame or a fork or anything else on the bike is, but the fact is it's the body that's pushing the most wind out of the way. And so if you can create a really well designed skin suit, it can actually make a huge difference to how fast you'll be able to go for a given power output. So it's an interesting one. We'll get back to that very shortly, but we're going to have a look back at what happened at the start of today's stage, so that those of you who just joined us can see how the race ended up where it is as things stand, with 76 kilometres to go. We actually had quite a few attacks at the very beginning of the stage. Took a while for the sprinters teams to get things under control. Not compared to the last few stages, but certainly more. Took longer than I thought it would for it to go today, let's put it that way. But in the end, these four riders went up the road, and over the first King of the Mountains, it was Dries de Bont who took the 3 points, ahead of Affini, who took 2. Gaburo there in third place of Bardiani. It was the Italian rider in the purple of that squad who took maximum points in the intermediate sprint. So we've had 1 KOM, 1 intermediate sprint so far, another KOM and another intermediate sprint still to go, and 75.5 kilometres before we get to the finish line in Treviso. Yeah, I mean, the difference between the best skin suit and the worst, off the top of my head, can be a second or 2 per kilometre.
That's a lot.
It is. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying that. Well, Dan Bigham's not going to be able to write to me and tell me, because he now works for Ineos Grenadiers, so he's probably not able to share that information anymore because Richard Carapaz is racing for them.
Come on, Dan, make a contribution.
Yeah, but Dan Bigham, if you're listening, if you're able to text me and tell me how much of a difference skin suits can make, please do, but I'm not expecting to hear from you. But yes, a very interesting one.
So it's potentially 35 seconds over the 17.5 kilometre course.
Exactly. A reminder that the Giro d'Italia is far from the only race that you can watch on Eurosport Discovery Plus and GCN Plus this weekend. Looking at start line images from the Tour of Norway, which has stage 3 of 6 today. You can also catch the Lotto Thüringen Rundfahrt Tour. Plus, we've got the Circuit de Wallonie, which I think we're going to see images from very shortly indeed. And later on today, you can catch highlights of Ride London. Oh no, that's tomorrow. Starts Friday, doesn't it? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Ride London. So we've got live coverage of that race on Sunday. This is a Circuit de Wallonie one-day race up in Belgium. There's another one-day race coming up on Sunday, the Grand Prix Marcel Kint. So the other race that we do have for you today is the Boucle de la Mayenne. Slightly smaller race in France, but it's a race where Mathieu van der Poel has won stages in the overall classification before. It runs from today all the way through to Sunday. So on Sunday, if you somehow have the time to do so, you can watch 6 different races on GCN Plus and Discovery Plus. They're not obviously all on our linear channels because there's just not enough room. And as I well know, the tennis is on at the moment as well. So there's not a lot of time to have all these different sports on our traditional television channels. Well, Dan Bigham hasn't texted me, but another time trialling guru, Michael Hutchinson, has. And he says, yes, 2 seconds per kilometre would be quite possible between optimised and non-optimised suits. How long's the time trial? 19 kilometres?
17.4.
So 35 seconds, potentially, the difference between the best and most optimised skin suit on Sunday and not.
So, how would that then compare him? This is what we can't know. The optimised skin suit from Bora Hansgrohe for Jai Hindley, if he's in his team one and not in pink, compared to the one from the organisation that will be the pink skin suit for the race leader.
We might have a track standoff at the end of the Marmalade on Saturday. Both riders trying to lose a couple of seconds.
And here comes Mikel Landa.
I mean, we're only half joking. It's long been. I mean, for the last decade or so, I remember Team Sky with our own Bradley Wiggins looking into this, and I think they might have actually used their own skin suit at a point which was made to look like the race leader's skin suit. I think that was disallowed. My memory doesn't serve me particularly well on this subject, but I'm pretty sure that they did that, and then later were told that they weren't able to do that going forward. But it's long been talked about. And you can see why the teams would want to do something like that, because basically when you are in the lead of a competition within a stage race like the Giro d'Italia, like the Tour de France or the Worlds or any other stage race, you are provided with a leader's jersey for the road stages, manufactured by whoever sponsors that particular race. I think it's Castelli for this one. And from that point of view, actually, Castelli should make a very, very good skin suit, and they sponsor some of the bigger teams still. But what Michael Hutchinson was saying was about optimised. So they'll make a very, very good skin suit, but it won't be necessarily exactly the right size for Richard Carapaz or Jai Hindley. So, yeah, anyway, subject to mull over for all of us.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one, because previously Ineos were using Castelli clothing, who is the official sponsor of the Giro d'Italia, but they're not now. They race in BioRacer, or as its home country in the Netherlands called a BioRacer. If they were with the old sponsor, they would have been able to trick something up to have a pink skin suit exactly as they wanted. They would have had that opportunity. So that's gone out the window. I'd like to thank Richard Dawson for his question. He's got us through 10 minutes of this standoff between peloton and breakaway, and we haven't really had to speak about the fact that it's still hovering around 1 minute 10, and there hasn't been a lot going on for the last 10 kilometres. Good on you, Richard. It is a very interesting question.
I also seem to remember that at the Tour of Romandy, which took place just a week before the Giro d'Italia, that on the final mountain time trial, Rowan Dennis was not wearing the leader's skin suit, but he was wearing his team skin suit, which has the Australian national colours on it. I didn't think about it at the time. I thought about it after that particular stage. I'll go back and see if I can find a picture. Killian Kelly wrote to me initially saying that Carapaz could wear his own team skin suit anyway and just pay a fine before looking at the rules and seeing that there's a potential fine and disqualification if he doesn't wear it. So that could be quite a risk.
Yeah. And if it's not disqualification, then at least a time penalty, where there goes your advantage of wearing your own skin suit. Back to the break, and it's Magnus Cort on the front. He's number 95 from EF. One of the many riders who's left his home country to go and live and train further south. Not necessarily always warmer, because he lives in Andorra, which of course in the summer is very nice, but certain parts of the year you've got to wait for the snow to clear before you can go riding in the higher mountains.
Well, talking of that, I was mentioning to you earlier that the scenery from the Tour of Norway yesterday was spectacular. The helicopter shots that were being provided over some terrain which had multiple sections of snow around it was just not completely gone, but plenty of white still there on the screen. It was absolutely magnificent. So if you haven't seen it, you'd have to catch up on the entire stages, but you can catch up on what you want, and you can do so, as I said, on GCN Plus or Discovery Plus after this race, later on this evening, whenever you so wish. But absolutely stunning.
I know there's plenty of people who tune in as much for the racing, they do it for the scenery and what they get in the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France. But if you do love your scenery, then do yourself a favour and have a look at the Tour of Norway. I've been to Norway a couple of times, and it's one of those countries with its scenery that absolutely blew me away. And sometimes when you look at it, you think, that cannot be real. It must be man-made to be perfect. It is a stunning, stunning country.
Well, the Dolomites, where we're going in 2 days' time, I know quite well, and they are quite similar in terms of just how in awe you are when you look at it. Obviously very different terrain to Norway, but I've always described the place where we're going towards Alta Badia with the Cima copy there and the Passo Pordoi as being like real life HD. There's just something that pops at you a lot more than anywhere else I've ever been to in the world. It's an absolutely fantastic place to go and just go on a holiday, really, or ride your bike if you like the climbs, because the climbs aren't too severe there in terms of gradients necessarily, or at least you can find some like the Pordoi that aren't particularly steep. Brilliant place, as I said, to go and visit if you ever get the opportunity.
Yeah, but Passo Pordoi, that is really steep, the Marmolada. I actually remember riding that in the year 2000, and there was one particular section, it just loomed in front of me like a wall, straight ahead, and never less than 12 or 13% for kilometres at a time, and just straight. It was horrid. It's brought a few champions undone in the past. It has a nickname, the Graveyard of Champions or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And the rest of us.
Yeah, just lower down on the slope out
yes, you don't have to climb very far to find our gravestone. I found a picture of Rowan Dennis from the Tour of Romandy final time trial, which was a mountain TT, and he is indeed in his team skin suit, albeit the Australian national champion skin suit, when I presume he should have been in the race leader skin suit, because he was leading the general classification going into that final day of the race. So don't know what the reasons were for that. Don't know whether we'll see Richard Carapaz or Jai Hindley or whoever's leading this race doing something similar on the final day, but probably enough skin suit talk for the time being, because if I haven't lost you all already, I'm probably about to. And so instead I'm going to talk about rain jackets. I had another question come in yesterday, I think it was, from Nigel, who said, hats off to Astana and DSM, because they have rain jackets that match their normal colours. Why don't more teams have rain jackets that match their normal team livery? Because it would make it at least easier to identify the teams, if not the riders, because you can't see their numbers.
It would. Sometimes it has to do with the actual fabric being used, and also the fact that a black jacket never gets dirty. Can you imagine being Groupama FDJ and your rain jackets were predominantly white? You know, a couple of races in, they'd be predominantly brown, and new rain jackets would be needed. So you often see navy coloured rain jackets, black rain jackets, and you know, they get through a number of wet rides before they do get offloaded. And then some, there's some particular fabrics there, they're breathable but water resistant. The water beads off them very much like a duck's back. And the best quality of that fabric is the one that's actually black to start with. It doesn't have to be sublimated, printed, and it holds its properties better without going through the sublimation process. So I'm told.
You know how I said I wasn't going to talk anymore about skin suits?
I didn't really believe it.
Well, I've got a last opportunity before we get towards this next categorised climb, as we see a little bit more impetus in this four-man group up the road. They've already begun to lift the pace by the looks of it. But Dan Benson, new editor-in-chief at Bello News, has written to me saying that the reason that Rowan Dennis did not wear the leader skin suit at the last stage of the Tour of Romandy is because the zip broke on it. Not as he was getting dressed, but in the press room, which is where the race organiser explained why he wouldn't be in the official race leader's skin suit. So, if you don't want to be in the race leader's skin suit, do some zip tampering.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder how hard he was zipping it up.
Well, it wasn't when he was getting dressed, apparently, but yeah.
Oh no, I think he's saying I was there. Well, not while he was getting dressed, he wasn't there. But he was there at the explanation in the press room.
Oh, I see. Okay, I've misunderstood what he was saying.
He's trying to avoid the creepiness of I was standing there watching him as he was getting dressed.
I see.
But yeah, if you have a good reef on the zip, yeah, you can make it unserviceable.
So maybe
on your own. There you go, Richard Carapaz.
Maybe on Sunday we'll see the leader of this race.
We'll see the team
coming
director
out with a broken zip, having to change into his normal skin suit. There we go.
We'll see the team director of Ineos. Here, Richard, let me give you a hand with.
Bright sunshine on our leading four riders, but in the distance it is beginning to look a little bit dark. Robbie is once again keeping a very keen eye on the forecast as things go on this afternoon, and he's mouth agape right now.
It's going to be a wet one.
Is it?
Yep. I've ridden in this region of Italy in the Giro d'Italia before, and I've seen this happen on a number of occasions. I remember one of the occasions, it was 2003 or 4, I think it was 2004. And we were coming into around the Venice region, and you could see the black clouds just building and building like a huge wave in the sky ahead of us. And it absolutely hammered down when we got to the final laps in San Donna di Piave. And it turned out to be carnage in the last corner. We had Mario Cipollini went down, along with the Spaniard Isaac Galvez, number of others.
Yeah. Well, at least the roads generally in the north of Italy are not quite as slippery as they are. I'm laughing because Robbie doesn't like to say out loud on air that he ended up winning a particular stage where he's describing an incident, but then he just points to me and puts his arms in the air and hopes that I will mention it for him.
No, you don't have to mention it. I wasn't going to mention it. It was one of those days. It absolutely pelted it down with rain.
Yeah, I was going to say that the roads in the north of Italy are not quite as notoriously slippery as those in the south if it does rain. But of course, any road in the world is a lot more slippery when it's wet than it is when it's dry, and particularly when you are on a circuit like we've got today. How many corners have you got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 defined corners, and possibly a couple that you can't see from the map of the circuit that's available on the Giro d'Italia website.
Yeah, and then the danger is the open roads are fine up in this part of Italy when it rains, but whenever you get into city streets, anywhere, doesn't matter where, the city streets are always more slippery. There's more of the white markings on the road, the paint that they put down for arrows and lanes, etc. And then, of course, they carry a heavier volume of traffic. Cars standing still at lights, drop a little bit of oil. There's the I don't know what you call it, like from diesel cars that you have that.
Yep.
Sort of like diesel dust that they leave. Mix all that up with water and away you go.
So if you've just joined us, I'll name these four riders up the road today for you. At the back, Magnus Cort Nielsen in the slightly redesigned EF Education Easy Post kit for the Giro d'Italia. They can't wear their normal pink one because of the colour of the leader's jersey. He is from Denmark. We've got an Italian in front of him, number 54, Davide Gaburo, the 29-year-old from Bardiani. On the front here, motoring along, is Edoardo Affini, another Italian, riding for Jumbo-Visma. And then a former Belgian national champion, Dries de Bont, a man that you just can't keep down in this race, neither this year nor last year, where he was very active as well. They've got 62.7 kilometres remaining, and they've opened up their throttles.
They've chosen their moment well too. It's coming into that little hilly part of the course, and the sprinters teams will be reluctant to ramp things up too much while they've got a couple of hills to come, particularly that wall that's coming in about 15 kilometres. So a good moment to push ahead really hard and really go for the finish from now.
Well, before we get to our categorised climb, we're going to have a few words from the European champion, Sonny Colbrelli.
Come stai? Ma io dai, sono qui, sto bene, questo qua.
Let's start with the simplest question, Sonny. How are you?
Conta adesso.
Well, I'm here, I'm fine, that's what matters now. Health is the most important thing in this life. How has the event
Ma ha cambiato, ti dico la verità,
Catalonia changed you? Oh, it certainly changed me.
Di sorridere alla,
to tell you the truth, when I wake up in the morning,
I
just try to smile.
Solo una chance.
I realise that we are only here for a certain amount of time, and we only have one chance. So I'm lucky to be here. Unfortunately, many are not here today to talk like I do. For this reason, I try to approach it with serenity day after day. Have you lost hope to race again? No, I haven't. To this day, I still feel like a pro rider. I go out on my bike, which is something that's very important to me, and something that a lot of people thought I wouldn't be able to do anymore after what happened to me in Spain. I am happy, but we just need to be patient. That's the first thing they told me, to be patient, and I am. I've tried to remain calm during all these months of inactivity. And there will come a time where we'll have some important tests to do. And we will then understand if I can return or if I need more days or even months of recovery. Last question. I know you're set to ride with your teammates later today. How does that feel? Beautiful. I can't deny that when I got there, I had to wipe away a tear because hugging my staff and my teammates, that always feels really good. I still feel like I'm among them, and what can I say? Those 50 or 60 kilometres will really be beautiful for me forever. Sonny Colbrelli, who had his most successful season ever in 2021, winning the European Championships and Paris-Roubaix amongst other races, who suffered a cardiac arrest at the end of the opening stage, I think it was, of the Volta Catalunya back in March. Hoping to return to competition, but that hope is made more complicated by being Italian, because there are very stringent rules in Italian sport for any rider that's been fitted, or sorry, any athlete, should I say, that's been fitted with a pacemaker. It's happened to a footballer recently as well, who had to depart from an Italian team to go and compete and play in the Premiership in order to carry on his career. So if Sonny wants to continue competing and he's given the all clear by doctors to do so, it might well be that he has to take out a licence with another federation, which might involve getting a different passport. But either way, we wish Sonny all the best. It must be incredibly hard to suddenly have your career and what you know as normal taken away from you in the blink of an eye. So with 60.5 kilometres remaining, it means that we've got almost exactly 5 kilometres until we get to this Muro, the Poggio. Not the one from Lannis and Raymer, just to remind you, but a very, very steep but short climb. 1.1 kilometres long, 12.3% the average gradient, 19% the max coming in the first 500 metres. I'm trying to think of how that compares to the Mur de Huy. Sorry, I've been told off for saying
the Mur de Huy is just over 1 kilometre long, gradients around 18%.
I'll check.
Steeper section in the Mur de Huy, sorry, I think must be 21%.
So not too far off. Just loading up a profile now so I can get a proper comparison. So the official ASO graphic says 1.3 kilometres long. Average gradient 9.6% with a maximum of 19. So same maximum gradient if the profile is correct, as we've got coming up in a short while. But an average gradient that is almost 3% less than what we've got coming up. Now, Robbie's not happy with this graphic.
Always got to check the details of a graphic and pull out that first 300 metres. It's only 5%. Doesn't count. Get rid of that. The actual steep part of the hill, the proper part of the hill. They've got a steep one coming as they descend down through the vineyards. As I said earlier, beautiful region to ride your bike. Flowing roads, beautiful corners, nice road surface. And the brake now using this part of the course really to their advantage. They've chosen their moment carefully to make their acceleration. They're going to fight hard all the way into the finish.
Four riders still together at the head of the race, and they have accelerated towards this very steep climb that they are about to take on. Not expecting any attacks from these four riders because they need each other. for the time being, to give themselves the maximum opportunity and maximum chance of keeping this main peloton and the sprinters contained within it at bay until the finish line in Treviso in 58 kilometres time. So just to remind you, 54 kilometres is where the top of this climb comes, so they'll be reaching the foot of it in just under 3 kilometres time. They'll be well aware, though, in the main peloton of what's going on up front, because even if the time gaps take a while to come back to them on the motorbikes with the either chalkboard or whiteboard, all of the sports directors and the team cars behind will be watching on television and see that they've accelerated out front, and they'll be passing that information on to the riders.
They will, and even though you know what the break is going to do more or less, say from around 60 kilometres to go, they're going to say, let's lift from now, ride a team time trial as hard as we can. But they've chosen the moment on the course very, very well, where we've got an uncategorised climb followed by that very steep, albeit short, mood wall of a climb coming up soon, but also the twisting roads that they've been riding on. Very hard for the peloton to use their power in numbers. There's often just the one rider that stays on the front for extended periods when it's technical like this. So, as you can see, the break is not losing any time. Over the last 5 kilometres, they're not losing anything.
Wow, look at the cornering from James Knox there. He had it almost sideways around there.
Yeah, but exactly the same thing that the break was doing a few moments ago through the same section. So it's been a really good moment. They've chosen to make that acceleration. So for the first 5 or 10 kilometres, the brakes, the peloton rather, is not able to pull anything back on them, because they're not just able to get down a big, wide, straight, open road and just swap turns with 6 or 7 or 8 riders chasing 4. So I love it when a break chooses their moments well, when they execute a strategy that gives them the best chance of surviving. When you think the odds are really against them, 4 riders off the front, 56 kilometres ago with 2.5 minutes. And what we saw before when they were just at a minute and a half, and we saw Rui Costa doing a big turn on the front of the peloton and being reprimanded by other riders, you would have given them no chance when it was a minute and a half. But the way they're playing it is really intelligent, and with guys like Court and Affini up the road, they are going to be really hard to catch.
And it helps having corners like this, because no matter how fresh you are, you can only go around a corner at a certain speed. Some, of course, slightly better at cornering than others. But nevertheless, you'd imagine that the breakaway went through those corners at exactly the same speed as James Knox of Quickstep Alpha Vinyl, who's riding on the front right now.
And also, when you're riding on the front of the peloton like this, you could be the best descender and corner in the world, but you need to ride at a pace that's not going to put your own sprinter in trouble. You don't want to split the bunch. You don't want to have them under too much pressure back in 20th, 30th position. So you need to temper your effort just a little bit to make sure you're not splitting things up, because then the cohesion at the front of the group goes out the window, and in the end you just end up losing time by having to wait for everybody to regroup.
What a stunning road to ride on, eh? Long sweeping corners. You know, if this was Great Britain, there would be no corners. It would be just straight up a 20% gradient for 2 kilometres, although they have gone straight up here pretty much. So we're on to this climb then, the Muro di Cadel Poggio, which I've been told means hillock Poggio, which is why there's a few of them around Italy. They're on to that now. Dries de Bont, Gaburo, Magnus Cort Nielsen and Edoardo Affini, the 4 riders who've lit the race up on stage 18 of the Giro d'Italia. Like I said, though, they will all want to stick together on this climb. If one of them's feeling better than the rest, they don't want to go solo with still 54 kilometres remaining, because then they've got almost no chance of holding the bunch at bay. So they've accelerated. They'll go up this, I was going to say at a steady tempo. I'm not sure that's even possible when you've got 19 and 16% gradients on the way up. But they'll stick together, is the point I'm trying to make. Look at the crowds out. Brilliant to see.
Great crowd, but it's also an important moment for the break to measure their effort on this climb. Of course, you want to keep the intensity that you have been riding at, but it's easy to go a little bit overboard, get everybody in the red zone, and then you get over the other side and you're just unable to push on in the next few kilometres like you were before the climb. So you've got to ride it like a time trial and just stay under that limit of tipping yourself over in too much intensity.
Listen to this.
The choruses of vai, vai, vai and die, die, die. And when they used to get yelled at to me, it's Italian either way, vai or die, it's go, go, go. But when I was riding up a mountainside and someone was yelling at me, die, 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 I'd say back, I'm about to, don't worry.
I'd say back, spingy, 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 or
Hey,
whatever the word for push.
Bush. You tend to learn that in a few languages, don't you? You go to and ride the Vuelta and you get to the Angliru and you suddenly learn to blurt out empujar, empujar.
Well, I'd like to tell them that they're over the worst part of this climb, but they might have dealt with the 19% gradient, but it doesn't really slacken off anywhere. I think the minimum gradient of this climb is 12.2%, and there's another sector right towards the top of 16%. So 2.5 minutes the gap. And this is the point, Robbie, where the general classification riders, you would imagine, are going to be extremely attentive towards the front of this race, just in case anything happens. I'm not expecting any attacks from the GC riders, but we saw how strung out it was through those corners, and with the acceleration that the bunch has had to make in response to what the breakaway have done up the road.
And look how narrow the road has gotten with all the spectators
amazing,
as well.
isn't it?
This is like a classic or a World Championships. You're not used to seeing these sorts of scenes on a stage like this one. Maybe up in the mountains, yes, close to the finish and near the peak of some of the major climbs, but everybody has come out to the Mur. And a bit of manoeuvring. Cavendish starting well towards the front. And the struggle is real at the back of the peloton. This is likely to really string the peloton out, and I imagine it will split, and there'll be a couple of groups having to chase their way back on as they get further up and the crowd builds and it's narrowed down to almost just room for 1 or 2 riders going through. The peloton will really string out and then over the top. I would imagine it's going to break into parts and have to race their way back on to get back in the peloton.
We're at the top, so Dries de Bont leads the breakaway group over the top, picking himself up 3 points in the King of the Mountains classification. 2 go to Gabura, a single point to Magnus Cort Nielsen, but none of them concerned with that because they're nowhere in the King of the Mountains overall classification. What they are concerned with is maximising their chances of going for a stage victory at the end of the day. Jai Hindley right up towards the front, being attentive, as I suggested a lot of the GC riders would be. Not far behind him, we can see the pink jersey of Richard Carapaz, and there are a few riders already beginning to struggle with the gradients that they're facing right now.
Well, I just spotted Mark Cavendish in around 20th position, and his teammates on the front. Their job is to, of course, chase the break, but ride a tempo that's not going to burn the likes of the sprinters' legs too much. So they can't afford to go too hard up this climb, which is, again, good for the break because it's another section where they're not going to really lose any time.
Well, you say that, but they're not holding back. And I just noticed Mark Cavendish was slipping back.
Just starting to drift. Yeah.
Could be deliberate.
Yes.
Might be that he's suffering, but he'll be well aware that there's an entire peloton, or there was an entire peloton behind him at the start of this climb. So he's got a lot of slipping room before he loses contact. He's just maintained his position. He's on the right-hand side, around about 25 riders down. You can see all of his teammates on the front. Peter Seri, James Knox probably done for the day. He was the guy that led things in from that team to this climb. But Clément David, what a ride he's been having at this year's Giro d'Italia. So many kilometres spent on the front of the bunch. Hugh Carthy, well, he's got the same heart rate he's had for the last 3,000 kilometres, I think. 153 as things stand. It's a little bit higher in the valleys and on the flat roads, a little bit lower when we get to the climbs. He'll live to fight another day. He spent so many stages up the road, hasn't he? And this is the difficulty at the back.
Reto Hollenstein.
And
the tall Swiss.
Sorry, yesterday's second place finisher, Gijs Leemreizer. 22-year-old Dutchman from Jumbo-Visma was also struggling just towards the back there. I thought we were about to see an acceleration from Alpecin Fenix then.
No, just getting himself
riders
through,
lined up on the left-hand side of the screen. Right, he keeps looking over his shoulder as well. The rider on the front for that team, who I think is Oscar Isabek.
Yep.
So the main bunch are over, and they've not conceded any time. In fact, they've taken around 6 seconds out of the breakaways time gap. They do have some sort of plan, Alps and Phoenix here. What are they doing? They've got a rider up the road.
Unless it's just getting to the front so he can see his soigneur and get a bottle of it. Maybe it's just wind it up a bit. Maybe there's news of somebody, one of the good sprinters, too far down the back, and they've got an opportunity to make life hard for them. Maybe Mathieu van der Poel has a plan.
So
it'd be a weird one, having a rider in front in the break.
Yeah, it would be. The way I'm looking at things now, the facial expressions of Peter Seri right here, right now, resemble the expressions of Peter Seri on the last stage that Arnaud Démare won. Forgive me, I can't remember. Into Cuneo, yeah. Over the top of the climb, which came much earlier that day, but they'd allowed the gap to go up to 6 minutes and 40 seconds. They knew at the point they crested that much larger and longer climb that they had a big chase on their hands, and it's a similar scenario today, because whilst it's 2 minutes and 23 seconds and whilst there are 51 kilometres still to go, they are well aware of the strength out front.
That they are, with Eduardo Affini and his time trialling capability. And we spoke earlier in the day about Magnus Cort and the sort of looking like the purple patch of form he's come into, still being there with the front group in the mountains when there were hardly 20 riders left in the front group anymore. Dries de Bont, he was off the front on the day that Alberto Dainese won his stage here in this Giro. A solo move with, we never thought he was going to stay away, but it was very strong nonetheless. So Gaburo, I would think if you're going to rate them in strength from 1 to 4, he's going to be number 4 in this group, which is not, I'm not saying he's weak, he's just with some really strong riders.
That said, he's got some of the most aerodynamic looking shoulders I've ever seen on any rider. He must be pretty slippery through the wind.
Shoulders like a snake.
So there is confirmation of who rolled across the King of the Mountains in first place. Dries de Bont picking himself up 3 points. But as I said, no concern to him. Well, this is now rolling along very fast indeed. We're inside the closing 50 kilometres of stage 18, the last sprinter's chance of this year's Giro d'Italia. Question is, will they be able to take it?
So that was a really tough little climb, that last one we went over. I've just had sent to me in a tweet from Velo Viewer themselves that the Muro Ca del Poggio is tougher than the Murdui. Side-by-side profiles.
That graphic also includes the false flat that you didn't like from the ASO graphic.
Yeah, true.
Well, we've had a lot of skin suit chats, we've had some rain jacket chat, and we've had some profiles of climb chat. It's time to hand back to the professional commentator. Rob Hatch is in the booth alongside myself and Robbie McEwen, alongside Sean Kelly. The race is on, Rob.
Too much pressure on my shoulders, that, Dan. But yes, the race is on, thankfully. And just watching it, sitting having our lunch there, you could tell the moment that the pace changed and they decided to really start using all that energy. It's going to be an interesting fight, this, isn't it?
It is, yes. We're just being told, though, Rob, that there's a promo for Roland Garros coming up. So if you would like me to take that for you...
Please do. Philippe or Chatrier today? Who's going to win?
Oh, dear.
Suzanne versus Longlange.
No, I'll leave that to you.
Thanks, Dan. We'll see you on the breakaway later on, and there might be a big bunch sprint to analyse, or will there be a miscalculation to analyse? We'll find out.
Oh, Rob, look at that time gap.
Ah, the Richie Beno gap. 2:22. Marvellous. It's a gap that they're having to ride really hard to control as well now, Robbie. Just look at that. It's a different look completely, isn't it?
Oh, well, for UAE, it's time to call Rui Costa to the front. This is the sort of turn he did earlier when they didn't need it. But now they're going to need every single one of them all the way in, because this group in front, they picked their moment well, as you said. You could tell the moment they went around 62 kilometres to go, they ramped things up as they hit the hill zone. Hardly lost anything for the first 15 kilometres after they've accelerated. Now they're onto the flatter open roads on the way to Treviso. So it's going to be advantage peloton when it comes to the numbers and the freshness of the riders in the chase. But 2 minutes and 22 to close with 47 to go. The break is not without a chance, and there's rain approaching at the finish for the final couple of laps. That will also complicate the chase.
Yes, just hearing about the spots of rain, Pete Burton on the ground relaying the message. That is not good news. Thankfully for the Giro, it was nice and sunny. Out there in the breakaway, they're racing to Treviso. Four riders still at the front, 2:22 of a gap, and Magnus Cort out there trying to power things on. They're in the final third of the stage now. Muro di Ca del Poggio, and the hilly terrain is out the way. Edoardo Affini also racing towards his home region. He's with Davide Gabburro, the third member of the breakaway. And Dries de Bont, the former Belgian champion, also a really strong motor in this four-up locomotive. We're watching the Giro d'Italia here. There's also plenty of other sport on the Eurosport and Discovery Network this month, starting with Roland Garros. It's the French Open tennis, and on court Suzanne Lenglen at the moment. Swiatek against Riska. You can see it's just started. If you want to put that on a second screen, that is Eurosport or Discovery Plus. And of course, it's only day 5 of the 2-week-long French clay court Grand Slam. And the rain stayed away from Paris, which is good news. Covers off. They have started to really put their foot down at the front. 2 minutes 49 seconds now. De Bont looks like he's giving everything. He's hurting. The effort faces are on. Sean Kelly returns to the commentary box. It's going to be a big fight now and an explosion of action in the final 45 Ks.
Well, yes, the big fight is on, but I'm afraid here for the breakaway. It's going to be a difficult one to hold out here. But yeah, it's always there's a possibility if those guys are really on a super day, and Gabburro is the one on the front here. He's going to suffer with the bigger riders. De Bont as well, we can see that he's puffing a bit. I'm a little bit concerned for this breakaway, and the power they have in the peloton. But again, the point, we're in this race. There's always surprises to be thrown up.
Well, we go onto the circuit with 22.2 kilometres to go. It's a circuit that has twists and turns. I think Sean counted around 9 turns inside the circuit, most of them coming inside the final 5 or 6 kilometres. Robbie McEwen, former sprinter yourself, what does the circuit present to those who are trying to chase down this breakaway? Difficulties?
It shouldn't be too difficult, to be honest. It's quite a large circuit, 13 kilometres with 8 or 9 corners. Most of those are quite fast and open. So I don't think it's going to diminish the advantage for the peloton with that power in numbers. It's not like you're going to have one rider stuck on the front for a long time and not able to roll turns. I think it's going to stay fairly open. It's just more a question of when it gets wet. It looks like not if, because the rain is already over Treviso. And it's starting to get wet there on the circuit. But also just looking at this gap, a few moments ago it was that we saw 2:20, but after all the sort of the skirmishes we've seen over that climb, and then I just saw 2:50 at the top of screen, now down to 2:41. So it was almost out to 3 minutes, dropping again now as we see more fresh riders coming to the front to join the chase. And this is Rui Costa. He talked about his turn he did earlier that was a bit too hard and narrowed the gap of the break too much too early, where there started to be the risk of other riders wanting to attack out of the peloton and bridge across to the break and join them. But now they do really need him giving everything he's got. There's Mark Cavendish shouting instructions or chewing on something, I'm not sure. No, he's having a feed. Arnaud Demar right behind him. And then lead-out man for Groupama FDJ, Jacopo Guarnieri. Just see those stats there of Arnaud Demar. As we know, 3 stage wins in this Giro and a second place. No wonder he's got such a massive lead for the Maglia Ciclamina.
That more or less on his back all the way to Verona, as long as he survives now. But it's the pride and the prestige of a stage win that they're playing for here.
Yes, well, of course the sprinters, they have hauled themselves over all these difficult climbs and really suffered, and they do not want to miss an opportunity here. And that's been the script right from the start of the stage. We see the way it's set out, and the sprinters teams were blocking everything and allowing a small group to get away, and they have done that now. But you can see the way the peloton is going here. Everybody is working hard, one long line. We can see Richard Carapaz there, the pink jersey, Ineos teammates around him, in front, behind, and the race is on. And 2:23 at this moment with 42 k's to go. It's a nice lead, but again, the fresher legs, and there's more riders in teams here that want to chase that haven't been really put to the front yet, and I think it's going to be a difficult one. It'd be nice to see they going onto the final circuit and just about holding off. We'd have a great race, but I feel we might see him being closed down a bit earlier than in the final kilometres.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sean, where you say closed down earlier. I think the peloton at the moment are going absolutely full speed to take as much of this gap off the breakaway as they possibly can before they reach the circuit, before they reach the wet roads. Because if you're having to chase a big gap in the wet, then that is treacherous. It's much more difficult to narrow down a gap, and everyone's being a little bit careful, and it could create absolute chaos and carnage in the peloton. So I think they need to rip as much off them as they can while they've still got dry roads.
We're going through the industrial area of the Veneto. Roundabout, straight roads, industrial estates left and right. There's Davide Formolo, who's not too far from home here, giving his all for UAE Emirates. They want to try and set up Fernando Gaviria today. It's Seri and Knox. They're the two riders for Quick Step Alpha Vinyl, hoping to put in Mark Cavendish. We've seen Clément Davy yet again riding for Groupama FDJ to set up his man, Arnaud Demar. And there's DSM as well. Romain Combo's ridden all day for Alberto Dainese. Second intermediate sprint here. The scenario that we wondered about at the start of the day, would it be all back together, because we weren't sure about the gap, were we? That's out the window. The GC lot aren't going to be worried now, because the 3, 2 and 1 bonus seconds have been taken, or about to be taken rather, by 3 of the 4 riders out there. They'll come through that banner, and then they'll come through another banner. 40 kilometres to go when we get through Valsugana. The 3 bonus seconds are going to go to Dries de Bont, but it's not of any interest whatsoever. It's all about sharing the turns, keeping the momentum going, trying to hold off a hungry pack chasing behind, with a last opportunity of a stage win for the sprinters in this Giro. 2 minutes 8 seconds, 40 kilometres to survive. Normally, this calculation would be one that you would be giving them no chance on.
Well, normally, yes, a 4-man breakaway, with just over 2 minutes inside the 40, just inside the 40 kilometres to go, you'd say, well, this is not going to work. But we've seen of recent, the way they're able to ride in the breakaway, and especially today, we've seen the way they've been playing about. They've run very easily, made the peloton back off. They've been sparing everything, and they are putting in a big performance here. But the peloton is, a bigger one, and bigger numbers wanting to ride here. All of that, it looks like that the peloton is slowly just eating into that advantage and pulling it back.
And Robbie, the mathematical equation here is 6 riders behind riding versus 4 in front. So they've got the numbers.
They do have the numbers, and they've had riders that have been sitting in the wheels for a lot of the day so far, and now just coming up to contribute to the pacemaking on the front. So they're coming up fresh compared to the 4 who are off the front. So that is another big advantage, not just the numbers, but the freshness as well. But our breakaway now just 17 kilometres from getting onto the circuit. And as I've said before, I was looking at this weather radar coming in, and that's going to be a really important point of when they get onto the wet roads and how much they can take off them before they get there. The sprinters' teams are lining themselves up.
When we get closer to the finish and onto the circuit, there'll also be the usual raft of GC teams getting into the mix and trying to keep the precious positions that they have on the general classification. First, normally, because they don't want any gaps. Secondly, they don't want any crashes. They want to keep their leaders safe. And up in this region, we've seen incidents at the end of stage racing before. I remember one where I think Alberto Contador very briefly lost the Maglia Rosa because he crashed just inside 3Ks to go, or just outside 3Ks to go, I should say, and it passed, I think, for just one day to Fabio Aru or something like that a few years ago. So things can happen, and everybody's going to have their wits about them. Man with his wits about him back in the bunch. He's riding along, spotting the moves. Bradley Wiggins, time to revisit him on the motorbike.
Breakaway. The four riders here, they're noticeable. The speed's picked up. We're sitting on 58, 59 kilometers an hour here on the run into Treviso here. The speed has, as I say, noticeably gone up. In the air, it's got to feel like it's just about to thunderstorm. There's kind of got that sort of weird drop in temperature and that kind of real atmosphere now, like the pressure's dropped a lot and it feels like the speed's gone up. Definitely has contributed to this here. But these guys now are still out of sight on these big long roads here, and they must have a feeling now they could get to this circuit here. We finished here, I think it was in 2013, in the same place, and the rain come down. It can be quite slippery if it's wet in town. But these guys now have to feel, like you can see just the effort they're putting in here, that they got a sniff of an opportunity here if they could just keep away. As I say, getting into that circuit now, that once you get through that finish line the first time, there's a feeling, or there'll be a sense that they can get as close to the finish as possible, really. But real noticeable, the effort. That was the main thing, really, to talk about. Not much else to talk about today, since they got over that climb now, that the effort's really gone into it now. And they're getting close to the finish. I will hand you back to the commentary team, and I will see you at the finish line.
Thanks, Brad. Increasing effort in the breakaway. But, Robbie, we also saw a bit of an increasing effort in the bunch there, because they were on an exposed section, and for a minute there was almost a split.
Yes, there's also just a very slight nagging breeze that they will have had coming in at about 10 kilometres an hour from their left-hand side. So just putting that little bit of extra pressure on riders a long way down the line in the peloton. And when they're riding as hard as this, it really gets strung out. And let's face it, we're getting towards the very end of this Giro. There's so much accumulated fatigue and riders just having so much trouble keeping up. And there'll be riders in that peloton starting to consider sitting up and just letting the peloton go and just riding the way into the finish line. And that's where you can see some big splits occur, and you don't want to get behind one of those.
Sean Ineos Grenadiers, almost to a man, obviously got the call because they moved up as soon as those splits had a hint of developing.
Yes, well, it's a time in the stage now where you have to start making the move up and get a bit closer to the front end of the peloton. We can see the way they're riding here, and we heard from Brad there, 60 kilometres per hour almost in the breakaway, so that tells, the bunch is going probably a bit faster. So, yeah, it's a time where you have to be in a position that, if there's a split in front of you, you do not have to close these gaps, so get as close to the front as possible. You can see here the face is being pulled. This is... It's proven to be, again, a hard chase. Advantage, it's coming down a little bit, but it's not coming down rapidly at all. And we're getting ever so close to this finishing circuit. We come on to it at, 22 kilometres to go, I think. And that gets it a bit more complicated for the peloton. So they're trying to really cut it down here back in the peloton. But, it's going to be a big one for them, a big ask to pull these guys back, and before we get to the circuit, certainly I don't think it's going to happen.
Robbie, if you had to pick like a fantasy team breakaway to be out there today and give them a chance, there's a few guys in here who would be in that fantasy team breakaway, wouldn't they?
It's
perfect.
Yeah, you'd certainly put Eduardo Affini in there, with his time trialling power. He's a big engine. In fact, I think he's had for him a bit of a disappointing Giro until now. Expected more in the early time trial while the race was still in Hungary, and we haven't seen him really get into a break with much of a chance. He's only been up the road once, I think, before this, but good to see him in the break. And when he gets a sniff of it, the big Italian, who's one of the very few riders who's beaten Filippo Ganna in a time trial, he's a real man to contend with on a chase like this one.
Dries de Bont, who almost gave himself an opportunity to hold off the peloton on a nervous day last week. And there's Magnus Cort, who remains strong while others fade in the final week of a Grand Tour. He's looking for that prize, remember, but they can't think about their individual options yet at all. It's just work as a team, give themselves a chance.
Yes. Yeah, well, let's consider that, Sean. The other day when Dumas won his third stage into Cuneo, and what the breakaway did to themselves within that last kilometre and a half.
Well, that's what you've got to do. You're out here with this advantage now, and the four, they just have to go pretty much on the limit all the way, and see what they can do here. Can they hold off the peloton? And again, with the 4, if they can continue on working well together, if one starts getting weak and then there's a second one wants to skip his turn on the front, that's where it really falls apart. So this is going to be interesting to see, can they all continue on riding here? We can see the bunt here, he's blowing a lot there and taking big mouthfuls of air, and if they can continue on like this, they're going to go on for quite a long time. Will it be good enough for them to hold out? Then we can see the rain is just hanging about.
It says the camera, if it just panned up a little, the camera was looking back towards the mountains and the sunny skies, but the rain is coming from the southwest and blowing in towards Treviso, and they're not quite at the edge of that rain cell yet, so it's up ahead of them. We'll just see what that has done to the circuit. Treviso's right on the edge of that rain system.
It's looking a bit dark over Bill's Mothers. Not pleasant in Treviso. The rain is starting to fall, and as Robbie's been talking about, as you're hearing about from Brad and from Pete, our guy on the ground, there are spots of rains around. Brad said it felt like it was about a thunderstorm. Coming through Spresiano. A lot of you might be just tuning in today. I know a lot of you might have circled this day as a day to get out on your own bikes maybe and wait until the almost inevitable sprint finish. Just over 32 kilometres to go. But it isn't inevitable because the breakaway are doing a great job here. If you are just tuning in, these 4 went away in the first 10 kilometres today. They had a small gap. Peloton were not really going to give them more than 2 minutes, so they knocked off their own effort. We had a slow hour and a half or so. They were always still out in front, saved a little bit of energy, and once we got over our final climb, the Muro di Ca del Poggio, just outside of Conegliano, they really started going strongly. They got their gap up to almost 3 minutes. These lot behind have had at least 6 riders committed. 4 different teams are working. And they've managed to chop off a minute so far, but there's almost 2 minutes of a gap. Just over 30 kilometres to go. And today we have Richard Carapaz in the pink jersey. He is 3 seconds ahead of second-placed Bora Hansgrohe rider Jai Hindley in the GC. We're coming up to our final race to the line in Treviso. More reinforcements are added to the front as the chase is pretty frantic here. They're trying to chase 4 riders up the road, 4 strong riders. Edoardo Affini, who is the rider from Italy, racing in his home region today for Jumbo-Visma. He's with Magnus Kort, who's in the pink helmet there, hoping to win Denmark's first Giro d'Italia stage for 10 long years. At the back, Dries de Bont, who's looking for a first bit of Grand Tour success. He's come close on a few occasions with Davide Gabburro at the front, and they're working really hard. Look at that, Magnus Kort, even though they've had an easier day at times, the strains ride up to almost 20 out of a maximum 21. The strain overnight, I'm afraid, was too much for Joao Almeida, who fell sick. He was lying 4th in the overall general classification, and if you weren't with us at the start of the day, I'm afraid to report that Joao Almeida has abandoned the Giro d'Italia, positive for COVID-19. So in the GC, the podium remains the same. It's Richard Carapaz leading by 3 seconds ahead of Jai Hindley. 3rd place is Mikel Landa, who moved up onto the podium yesterday. 4th now is Vincenzo Nibali. Today, though, it should be about the sprinters. Mark Cavendish looking for win number 2. He's already been in the top 3 on a couple of occasions more. 6th on stage 11. This is the last sprint opportunity. Sean Kelly, they'll all be working really hard because it's the last chance for so many guys now.
Yes, and they are working hard, and they've been doing that for quite a while. And we can see here on the front of the peloton, you can see the 2 riders from Alpecin Phoenix. They are sitting a little bit further back. Old Danny is up there, and Tobias Bayer. They're just sitting on here, but I counted there about 8 maybe riders in front. It looks like, you have 8 riders chasing, and then there's other ones just appearing maybe. I could see the rider from Frances de Jus, Konolovas, they're also coming up. So there's about 8 or 9 riders, pushing on the front of the peloton. But you can see there Ludvigsen, Tobias from Groupama, he's sitting behind Cavendish. So there's fresh men waiting there, and if it comes to a point where they think that they're not going to close it down, they will be put into work there. So for the moment, there's still a lot of power left in the peloton, but 1:42 as we get real close to get onto this circuit, and the weather conditions, that could be the decisive part of the end of this stage.
Well, there could be rain coming. We're looking at Fernando Gaviria, who is a real rival to Cavendish and Demar. We also saw a shot there in the black jersey of Alberto Dainese, a stage winner. And Robbie, for UAE Emirates, it becomes even more important now for Fernando Gaviria, because they've lost their GC challenge overnight in Joao Almeida, who had to abandon.
Indeed, so they're looking for some success here with Gaviria, and he really wants that stage win after going close a couple of times. I've been looking at the evolution of this gap. When the break accelerated with around 60 kilometres to go, they had 2.5 minutes. They've now got less than 30 to go. They're 6 kilometres from entering the circuit. They've only lost 50 seconds in the last 33 kilometres. This is going to be close, and once we get on a circuit, that's a little bit better for the break. If it's wet, that's a little bit better for the break again. And the bunch here, the sprinters teams, are going to need to commit more resources to this chase. It's getting a lot like what we saw to the stage in Cuneo, which in the end, the bunch caught the break in the last 500 metres of the stage, leading to a Demar win. It's going to be something very, very similar, and they may just have got it wrong today, because this four-man group is holding strong and not giving up very much time at all on the road that is more suited to the peloton. They should have a big advantage, and they're not eating away a lot of this gap.
Bit of panic going on as well. Bert van Leerberger very animated there. All-out effort. Even at the back there, resting after his turn as much as he can. Dries de Bont suffering, swinging, but emptying the tank. This is a wonderful fight developing on the screens now.
Yes, it is. It's going to be a spectacular final here, and you could see there, you know, the rider from the Quick Step Alpha Vinyl team there, just you know, motivating Van Leerbeek. He's trying to get you know, more bodies to the front, more teams contributing here. And when you look at the front of the peloton, the way they're riding here, you'd expect them to be closing down that bit quicker, but it is coming down, but it's coming down very slowly. And is it going to go, you know, very close to the finish once again? You can see here Van Sevenant just the same, bobbing up and down there. He's really under pressure in this sort of flat terrain. He doesn't, you know, have that big power, but again, 139 is just ticking down slowly, but the kilometres are coming down also very rapidly.
Timon Arendsman is now contributing as well. It's wonderful to see all hands to the pump, and we're talking about guys who have emptied themselves looking for stages, but it's great to see this commitment to the team.
Yes, you can see Kobe there, another one who is, you know, a big powerful rider, and yeah, he's a solid one on this sort of terrain. And yeah, the four are putting up a big battle, and it looked like in the earlier part of the stage when they started slowing down and the peloton was just leading them, hang out there. You know, I was expecting them to have it under control much easier in the peloton, but it's proved me again that the four in the breakaway are really pushing them up a great battle here.
Well, before you gentlemen came back in commentary, we were talking about the break having chosen their moment to accelerate really, really well. You get what you're given by the peloton. See how much they'll let you hang out in front. It was just under 2 minutes, but they went when the race was getting a little bit hillier and the road's more technical with lots of turns. They went for it, got another 30-40 seconds before the peloton even realised. And then the next 10 kilometres was really tough for the peloton to make any sort of concerted chase, take any time off them. So it's been a really well thought out strategy by the men in the break. And now with still more than a minute and a half to go and they're about to hit the circuit, it is not a done deal that it's going to be a sprint today.
And once they hit the circuit, they will turn right onto Viale della Repubblica. There'll be a very sharp right-hand turn. They go through Fontanelle. I'm pretty sure that's the area where we've stayed before, up near the Pinarello old headquarters. Then there's a big left turn, twists and turns coming back in. A couple of turns inside the final 3 kilometres before they start the final lap. So they'll already have a look at the finish, but they've got to catch these guys before the finish becomes a thing. It's a race, and a proper one, as we head to Treviso. 2.5 kilometres before the breakaway hits the final circuit. It's 1.5 laps around Treviso, 22.2 kilometres to the finish line. And at the moment, Davide Gabburro in the purple. Just behind him in the pink, you saw Magnus Cort really going for it. And behind, we have a new team added into the chase. Number 74 from Cofidis, Wesley Creder, is also started to get interested as well.
Yeah, that's for Davide Cimolai and Simone Consoni, the two fast men from the Cofidis team. And what we're missing compared to that chase into Cuneo where they caught the break inside of the line and Demar won, we don't have Israel Premier Tech riding on the front because there's no more Giacomo Nizzolo in the race. So they're missing 3 or 4 riders that rode on that occasion that aren't there today to help. Now we've got Cofidis contributing, but you can see the intensity on the front, the way riders are talking to each other. Quick Step trying to encourage more riders from more teams to come up and help with the workload. But there's just not the numbers when you get to this end of a Grand Tour.
Berit van Leerberger is directing operations. He's on the radio there. We've had a new fresher rider come up in Mauro Schmidt. So a change of personnel in a couple of teams. We saw a couple of riders going backwards for Groupama FDG as well. And I guess there's only so much everybody can give, Sean.
Yes, well, there's only so much you can give, but riders from the teams that are riding Groupama and the team of Quick Step, you know, they have the numbers. They're a complete team, and a rider can just slip back for a little bit, get a bit of recovery, then appear again and start pushing on. And that is, you know, a big part of, you know, keeping this peloton going at a very fast rate. And yeah, the 4 out front, you know, they have to give it their all. There's no place at all for a little bit of a rest period in the breakaway.
So who did everybody go for today? Demar, Dainese, Demar, Cavendish, Demar. That was who the experts picked. Answer coming in 23 kilometres. Nobody went with the breakaway. Will they have a chance? Touch and go. How much, he says? How much? 130 was the cry. With the wind blowing away as well. And if you're only just switching on your television sets, computers, tablets, phones, however you're watching around the world, we're speaking to you across different continents. I can tell you that there are rain spots on the road at the finish line just a few kilometres ahead.
Well, I think if the break is going to be the chance of staying away, if they're going to bring this home and get the victory between them, I think they need the rain to start as soon as possible to just put every hurdle possible in front of this chasing group. It's going to be a really tough one. And DSM, they've got Chris Hamilton up there swapping off as well. Alberto Dainese, this is his home stage as well. Another rider from the region. And after he won about a week ago, they said it must be great to win in your home race. He said, well, it's great to win, but not really my home race because I live in Treviso. I think he missed the point of the question a little bit. It was saying in your Giro d'Italia, but he had his heart set on this stage, a homecoming that he knew was a flat stage and another chance to sprint for the win.
So here we go on to the circuit. Something to eat for Gabburro. No, he's getting rid of it.
Ballast overboard.
Save as many watts as you can. Any little bit of effort.
And again, the gap has only come down by 20 seconds in the last 10 kilometres.
And it's going to be a question of the 4. How much have they left here with this, you know, 21 plus kilometres to go? When you're in the breakaway, and they've been out there for so long, and they've been pushing, you know, full on for quite a while now. At this point in the race, yeah, if they start running out of energy, some of the 4 guys in front, that's when it really gets difficult. But if they can continue on like they've been riding and go all the way towards the finish, they will hold out there for a long time. And looking at this finishing circuit here, you know, there's a lot of very long straights. Some of them are maybe 2 kilometres long, so that is going to be advantage to the chasing peloton here. If it was more technical, then with 4 men up in front, if they were really brave, you could, you know, really hold the advantage much more if you're going around a lot of cornering all the time. But this is going to be, yeah, a little bit of an advantage to the peloton. But yeah, will they have enough? Have they got enough teams and riders contributing here to close down this 118 at the moment is coming down, but still 20 kilometres, we're getting ever so close to the finish.
And it's looking like a significantly smaller peloton to my eye.
Yes. A heck of a lot. And maybe they heard your suggestion a bit earlier back, Robbie.
Yeah, I think there's some riders who have just let things go. Said, well, you know, inside the last 25, 30 kilometres to go, they know they can ride inside in the time limit. They're over it. They just sit up and say, just get me to the hotel, get me off the bike. No more efforts.
And thinking tomorrow, of course, for the breakaway. You know,
also,
the early part of the day, you know, the riders are going to be working that out and you know, spare as much energy as possible and try and get the break of the day tomorrow. And maybe it'll be the one that can be successful and get a stage win. The teams that, you know, really need that.
Here we go then. These are the straights that we talked about. This one twisting ever so slight to the right, going through Fontanelle.
Well, they'll pick up a little bit of a tail breeze at this point then. Not that there's much out there, but every little bit counts. They've been riding into a bit of a crosswind from their left for most of the last 30 kilometres, so they enjoy a little section where the breeze is just helping to push along a little bit. Gap at 1:15, but inside 20 kilometres to go, it's going to be a nail-biter.
This is an area that's very well known to the Eurosport GCN cycling team. Stayed up here a couple of times in Villorba, not too far from Fontanelle, home of Pinarello. You can see now that the white jersey has been dropped into a further group. So, Robbie, you were just talking about people being dropped off, and just make sure, just keep your eye on this, because Juanpe Lopez has ended up in a split that occurred obviously behind the camera when we were looking at those open sections early on. There's a lot of riders out the way, almost the entire Israel team are out there, but if Juanpe Lopez is there, it'd be good to have a look at the full group just to make sure that nobody else has missed out. And the way they were riding, Sean, it looks as though they certainly want to bring that back to keep Lopez as close as together in the white jersey competition.
Yes, well, with the rate the peloton is going there, if they're a little bit too far back, and we mentioned that with Ineos, you know, they were moved up a bit. You have to be in that top 20, 30 riders. You have to see who's in front as well. You know, if you have riders that looks like they're struggling a bit, you just get around and move ahead of them in that peloton.
Well, we're seeing dry roads here despite the threat of rain. Of course, we were told a couple of spots were maybe coming down, but looks nice and dry for now, which is good news. 5 kilometres to go. Look at these roads. Potholes left and right. They'll have all been told about this. This is interesting at 5 kilometres to go. There's another swing left here. And this is where it narrows once more. This is going to be really interesting come the final circuit. There'll be some GC riders having nightmares about these turns coming into 3 days to go. 17.5 kilometres remain on stage 18 of the Giro d'Italia, and as is becoming customary on stage 18, there's a possibility of a miscalculation by the peloton hoping for a bunch sprint, and there's a band of 4 riders up the road trying to fend off the monster chasing them.
Well, it could have been a big miscalculation here. We spoke about how the break had been riding it, and as we go back to the group containing Juan Pedro Lopez, in that white jersey competition, he has about 6 3/4 minutes lead over Taman Ardensman, who is in the front group, working on the front in the chase behind this breakaway, who are now, well, backed up behind team cars, but a nice little bit of slipstream with, I don't know quite what would have happened there to have them back right up behind the group, but as long as they haven't had to touch the brakes, then you know, that's a little bit of fortune for the break. Get a little bit of a boost.
Sean, what do you make to the first side of this circuit?
Well, it is a concern for a lot of the riders here. And the GC men, of course, you know, you do not want to get into a difficulty here. Have a mechanical is the worst place possible when you're on a circuit. Even though the circuit is not a real technical one, you can see here there is technical corners, but then you get quite a good run of straight road where it could be, you know, 1.5 kilometres, 2 kilometres. If it was cornering all the time, every 300 metres, 400 metres, it would be more concerning again. But you can see the way they're pushing here, and you can see, yeah, the white jersey, he's in a split here, and his team has to ride now. And you know, in that the young jersey classification, Aronsman is, you know, just 10 minutes off, so they have to keep on riding here, and he was riding up the front, so he's going to stay in that front group. and Trek is going to have to just continue on a time trial here to the finish.
It's also worth remembering that the moment, with Joao Almeida having gone home, Juanpe Lopez is also 8th in the general classification. There's the other factor of trying to keep him into the top 10 as well. So a lot going on there, but they're fighting a bit of a losing battle. 1 minute and 10 seconds behind the Maglia Rosa group at the moment for Juanpe Lopez and Trek Segafredo.
Yeah, well, the closest man to Lopez in the GC is Pozzovivo behind him, but I would imagine he's also caught in that back group. Hugh Carthy, another 5 minutes further back after that. The data now of Magnus Cort, 182 beats a minute. This is maximum effort. The strain at 20.2 of a theoretical maximum. Well, it doesn't measure any more than a strain of 21. So that is right up there. There's no question. Is he giving it everything he's got? And look, another sharp corner. This is exactly what the break need compared to the peloton. The more turns, the more technical, the better. Makes it hard for the peloton to use that power in numbers, fresh riders coming to the front. And at 1:19, you know, I've just been going through my notes from a few days ago. That chase into Cuneo where they caught the break in the last 500 metres. At 15 kilometres to go, they had 1 minute and 49 seconds, 30 seconds more than this group has at the moment. And they got caught.
Doesn't look like it's shifting so much to me, though, at the minute, Sean. 120's just gone out.
No, it's not shifting big time, and yeah, it's an interesting one. And yeah, the four leaders here are working quite well together, and yeah, the front of the peloton, we're seeing the same teams continuing on here. And yeah, it depends on the peloton now, how many you know, riders are here from the teams that want to close this down. How much have they got? Because at this point in the race, you know, sometimes we talk about numbers, but if you have the numbers but they're not really strong, well, then they're no good to you. Where if you have the four riders here that work well together and just continue on working real well, they could be the ones that prove to be the strongest in the end.
That is exactly right. It's what everyone's got left in the legs. I mean, they're not what they were a week ago in that chase to Cuneo on stage 13. And this is a much harder prospect. And the time gap is, although it's falling a lot slower than we saw that group the other day that got caught inside of the line. So I'm giving this group still a very, very good chance of making it.
This is what the last kilometre will look like. It's straight, and you'll just be able to see as they edge up to the right-hand side here. It's more of just a little peek around the corner rather than a proper turn. They will see the finish line. This is an opportunity on this sort of road for the peloton to gain some time back.
Yes, well, there's sections on this lap here, you know, for the peloton to gain. But again, you have to have the men with the power to, you know, really push on those big straights. And that is the question now: who has got the most here? You know, the bigger numbers of riders on the front of the peloton, or is it going to be the breakaway? It could be a case where we see the break being caught here in the final run to the line.
The regulator just in front there. I wonder if that was Damiano Cima's motorbike and he's having flashbacks to 3 years ago. The stage winner when the peloton in this region were last given a lesson by the breakaway. Do not underestimate us. 1 lap to go. The bell is about to ring, and they've still got the chance of having the winning numbers called out in the breakaway lottery. It's Dries de Bont, Davide Gaburo, Magnus Cort and Eduardo Affini riding for their very lives here. 1 minute 10 is the peloton, and the white jersey still actually with the King of the Mountains, Koen Bouwman. He doesn't have to worry about time riding there behind at 1 minute and 20 from the pink jersey group. So Juanpe Lopez slipping down in time in the GC today.
Yes, and a surprising one that you want Lopez is getting caught out here, because you would expect with the team, you know, when you look at the riders they have in that Trek Segafredo team, you would expect them to keep them up there very much to the front. But yeah, if a rider is struggling as well and he's really running out of power, well, then it can be a difficult task to keep him in the good position.
Robbie, less numbers for the chasing group at the minute. There's only 4 riders rolling through to do their turn at the moment.
And that has been it just shows how hard this race has been over the last week, especially that the riders we've seen, as Sean just said, it's no good having the numbers if they don't have the power to push the pedals hard enough. But they've now, just as they're going to cross the line, got the gap to under 1 minute, 59 seconds with 12, and they're back out to 1 minute with 12 kilometres to go. Advantage, breakaway.
Mauro Schmidt has come to the front, and he's really committed in front of Peter Seri. Then you have Diego Lisi, Ignatas Konolovos, and behind him, Tim and Aresman. Then it's the lead-out trains. One team has cleared off. Cofidis are no longer there.
Use their resources, use what they had until those riders are exhausted, and that's what you get. Often the case is the riders back in the peloton, the domestiques, they're more tired. They've just got so much fatigue. They can't go as hard as a man like Eduardo Affini with his time trial background. He's an absolute beast. And if he doesn't want to be caught, then you've got to be on your best day if you're going to catch him. Look at the struggle back here.
Peter Seri giving everything to try and set up Mark Cavendish. Now it's Diego Ulisi's turn. But Affini rides away. De Bont's on his wheel. Davide Gaburro's there, and Magnus Cord at the back. What a fight this is. 11 Ks to go. We're in Treviso, in cycling country in northeast Italy. The Veneto, one of the homes of cycling in the entire Italian nation. Behind, one of the teams that's got an Italian co-sponsor is struggling, because Juanpe Lopez today in the white jersey, because Joao Almeida's abandoned. They've missed a split here, and they're 1:15 behind the Maglia Rosa.
Yes, and just looking down through the chasing group of the pink jersey, you can see Pozzovivo's in there, and a number of riders from Intermarché Wanty. So Jan Hirt is also, up there in that front group. So Pozzovivo has done a good job, considering Lopez has lost a bit of ground. So again, on a stage like this, you'd expect nothing to change in the GC standings, but it's always possible to happen when you have teams riding at this rate, even on a flat run into the finish.
Mathieu van der Poel off the back of the main bunch. Tomorrow's another day for him. Yesterday was a special day. He's got the red numbers on as the most combative rider on the way to Lavarone.
Yeah, you can forgive him sitting up today after yesterday's exploits.
You certainly can. 10 kilometres to go. The other factor to add into the mix here, Robbie, is if one of these riders starts to think too early of a little bit of glory.
Yeah, and we saw that exactly. We keep going back to that very similar situation almost a week ago in Cuneo. It was the break got inside of the line. They could have held them off, but at 1.5 kilometres to go, they started looking at each other. They left Pascal Incorn on the front, and it was death by hesitation. All hesitated to do another turn, and then they were caught, and they lost their chance at stage victory. Today, they just need to keep driving it until they're sure, 100% sure, that they're going to be the ones to fight it out for the stage win amongst themselves before they try and get tactical, playing that cat and mouse, trying to be in the best position to either place an attack or start their sprint. Just make sure you're holding off the peloton.
Entire Trek team working for Juanpe Lopez behind. They're not changing the gap. In the peloton, however, now only 4 riders at the front. Peter Seri has finished.
Yes, well, it's changing all the time, and it looked like that they're starting to run out of the numbers in the front end of the peloton. And looking at the advantage, 105 here at the moment, inside the 10 kilometres to go. If they have a pretty good advantage going into the final 3 kilometres, when you look at the riders that they are, Magnus Kort, they are going to be concerned about taking him to the line, because he is a real good sprinter. We can see him in bunch sprints. He can get a real good place, but a small group like this, he is a real strong one. So De Bont, for example, he might start sitting on, and that's where you can lose it. If you have a little bit too much of an advantage, they can start playing around a little bit too early.
Robbie, we're hearing that Ramon Sinkeldam and Phil Bauhaus, Sinkeldam a lead-out man for Demar, Phil Bauhaus a sprinter, may well be caught up in the second group at 2:39, so they could be out the way. The gap is growing, and did you see that last shot of the peloton?
Yeah,
it was minute.
I was just going to say, that helicopter shot, that was the peloton, not a distance group. That is all that is left, and it was tiny. There's not many riders left to chase. Now UAE coming back to the front, Diego Ulisi, they're riding for Fernando Gaviria. But what some of the teams aren't doing, like Arnaud Demar with his Groupama FDJ riders, they have not committed any of their lead-out men to the chase. They're trying to save them to prepare the sprint to lead Arnaud Demar to the final 200 metres. But that's what's going to cost them a stage or a bid for stage victory, by not using absolutely everyone and in the end isolating the sprinters to do it by themselves. They're not going to give themselves the chance to even sprint for victory. They needed to commit everybody earlier. They're keeping riders up their sleeve for the lead out. They're not going to do a lead out. It's going to be all over. 1 minute with 7.5 kilometres to go. the catch looks impossible.
They're fighting a losing battle, certainly.
Yes, you can see there, Groupama, as Robbie said, there's only one rider there around the Mar, and it looks like it's his lead-out man, Garneri. So, yeah, you know, if there's riders there, I think they'd be closer around the Mar and be in a position if they need to get into action. But, you know, in just 7 kilometres to go, over a minute in advantage, it looks like the 4 are going to be able to win the battle.
Problem for
bit of a
Affini.
Mechanical problem for Affini, it seems, yep.
He's got it solved by the looks of things. A little something with his drive chain. Looking down, he was spinning a small gear, but he seems to have rectified that now. Back to the chasing bunch. Konovalovas, he's just pushing riders back into the line, and he really needs to be coming through to the front and doing his biggest turns that he's got in the legs. He's under 7K, still more than a minute. I am starting to think the sprinters are going to have a very sleepless night tonight.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. They didn't make the calculation. 3 riders in front. Firepower's getting less, if anything. Yeah. And because this peloton's smaller as well, we might not have the normal big GC fight and those sort of helping naturally to bring it back as well, Sean.
Well, I think the road here, you know, big, large road, you know, flat, you can just sit in there, and the GC men are just going to sit in and behind with their teammates around them. And talking about making the calculation, I was the one said that it was going to be pretty much impossible for the breakaway to hold out there. So, yeah, it's just, you just never know how good the breakaway is. And this breakaway of 4 riders, they have, you know, rode an excellent stage here. Tactically, they've rode really well, but also they've got the power, and that's what it's about. If you've got the power, well, then you can do great things.
Yeah, we saw it in the planning, the conversations, the politics that went on early on. They were chatting. They were unhappy with the gap. They've obviously performed brilliantly, but they've got to finish the job. Still 5.7 kilometres to go. If they start to fall out, the advantage can disappear.
It can. It is all in their hands, as Sean said. It is all about strategically how they've ridden it, but you've got to have the legs to back that up, and they certainly do have that. And we're still just under a minute, 5.5 kilometres to go. It is completely in their hands if they win this stage or not. They just need to cooperate long enough to make sure it's going to go to one of them. But the thing is, out of these 4, as they've ridden as teammates as today, that's all going to go out the window soon, because of course only one can win.
Today we started stage 18 in Borgo Valsugana, up in the province of Trentino. We now have 5 kilometres to go on the road to the finish in Treviso. We're in the Veneto, in cycling country in northeast Italy, and stage 18 at the Giro d'Italia in the last few years has thrown up surprises, regrets and nightmares for the sprinters teams who hang in the race, hold on through the mountains, hang tough, survive, but don't get their final chance. It happened 3 years ago with Damiano Cima in this very region. It happened in the northwest of the country 1.5 years ago with Josef Czerny holding everybody off. Today, it looks as though it could happen at either Dries de Bont, Magnus Cort, Eduardo Affini, or the rider from the second division team, Davide Gaburro, could be making it. Davide versus Goliath. 47 seconds, just over 4 kilometres to go. One more team in a desperate bid to try and make it a sprint is here at the front. Cofidis adding to it. It's their last chance to put the accelerator down now, Sean.
Yes, well, but all too late. I think, you know, again, the riders are, and the teams are just trying to conserve as many men for the final as possible. And slowly they release a rider when they see that it's not coming down. And now we're seeing those teams come to the front. But with this, you know, 44 seconds, unless they really start playing about in the final 4 kilometres, the stage win is between the 4 men out of the breakaway.
Yeah, well, it should be. And you know what? It's going to be up to these 4, and that whatever that playing around will be. But the worst mistake that the peloton could make from now, those chasers behind, is to give up hope. It looks impossible. It's a snowball's chance in hell of catching them, but you need to ride all the way in, just hoping that the break makes a mistake at the last possible moment and snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
And we can see there, you know, the front of the race, 49, we can see the peloton going at 54, so it gives us an indication. The peloton is still going at a much faster rate, but time, I think, is too short to the finish now for them to close this, plus 40 seconds.
Just over 3Ks from the finish, and those in front might start thinking about how they need to win. We know that Magnus Cort surely is the favourite in a sprint, but look at those strain numbers. The heart rate's been up for a long time now. We can always get surprises at this point in any race.
Yes, you can.
Sorry.
You can. Go, Sean.
I think everybody is pretty much on the same strain. If we had all the 4 men out of the breakaway, they're just pretty much giving it their full here. And are they going to continue on as we go inside the final 3 kilometres? Will there be somebody who want to just spare a little bit for the final run to the line, or maybe trying to a surprise attack inside the final kilometre?
Yeah, we're seeing those last-ditch efforts now come out of the chasing group, those big turns. The men who are destined to do the lead-out for their sprinter, they're making their efforts now to just try and pull them back on terms with the break. And up in the break, it's not your normal sprint anymore. Who would normally be the fastest? That often goes out the window. It's who's the freshest, who's got the most power left in the legs after an effort like this one. Magnus Cort, he's been in this situation a number of times in Grand Tours, and he's won. He is the man to beat in this group.
He was working hard trying to get fit after a collarbone break in Andorra. Recovered, started the Giro, looking to take the first Danish stage win at the Giro in 10 long years, hoping to complete the set. He's got a win at the Tour, he has wins in the Vuelta. Dries de Bont has tried and tried and tried. He's not a seasoned Grand Tour rider, but he's a top operator. He is looking for a first Grand Tour stage win. The same at the back with Edoardo Affini, who's won in time trials. He is looking for something here on the road. And Davide Gabburro at the front has never won a bike race, but he's hoping he's bought the winning ticket. You never know. 1.8 kilometres to go. Behind there, just at 26 seconds now. They're gaining as we twist and turn. GC riders can breathe a sigh of relief because they're inside 3 kilometres to go.
Yes. Shorter, softer turn there from Gabburro swung off, and if anybody misses a turn before they get to 1 kilometre to go, that could be the end of them. They've got to agree to keep swapping off until they know they've got it. And this is the point. 1.5k to go. Riders start to think about their sprint or placing an attack. Someone will miss a turn, the pace goes off, and look at the efforts being made behind.
Just keep your eyes on the green jerseys of Borgo as well, because there's a bit of a split developing in the GC group there as well behind. And Richard Carapaz was right up to the front. Remember, there were only 3 seconds before them as they started today. We could have splits as well. This is a fascinating finish. We're coming up to the final kilometre now, 1,000 metres to go. They've worked brilliantly as a team, and we said we had to be careful. We said we had to be careful, and that is why, because Jai Hindley is off the back, and no wonder Ineos Grenadiers were pushing on at the front. It's all happening at the Giro d'Italia. 17 seconds. Let's concentrate on the stage, because they look around, they wait, they watch each other for the first time. It's Magnus Cort with a pink helmet here. The yellow behind him, it's Edoardo Affini. A little bit of soft pedaling. Nobody coming through to take their turns now with 650 metres to go. Gabburro, who Robbie said was the first one to just miss a little turn there. He's at the back for Bardiani. They have not won a stage of the Giro d'Italia in 6 long years. Those who are approaching behind in the bunch are making sure they are there and ready to go. But surely they are too long in the tooth now. They have miscalculated. The day will go to a winning ticket from the breakaway. So it's Cort, Affini alongside de Bont and Gabburro in that order. They come to 200 metres to go. It's Cort who sprints out, but I'm not sure he's going to have it. Can he go again? Let's see. It's all about who has the strength. It's Affini as de Bont is coming through the middle. Dries de Bont is there. It's de Bont through the middle. Oh, wow! Winning ticket from the breakaway goes to the Belgian. Behind they will sprint for minor places, and the break holds off a miscalculating peloton in the Giro d'Italia. David beats Goliath, and here seconds gained for Richard Carapaz. What on earth happened behind? Jai Hindley dropped from the bunch, we think. Was it an incident inside the last 3Ks? Because I think it might be,
Yes,
we've seen him off the back.
It looks like he's just, cruising in here, so that tells that it must have happened inside that 3K.
We didn't see it. We'll wait for confirmation. But again, the lack of urgency here looks like that there is an issue mechanically, maybe. Again, we wait for confirmation. But Jai Hindley is being helped over the line here. So much chaos in there. And if it isn't an incident, there's going to be almost a minute gain there for Richard Carapaz over Jai Hindley. There's certainly going to be almost a minute lost for Juanpe Lopez in the white jersey competition. Oh, it was supposed to be a boring day, wasn't it?
It certainly was looking like a day where we were going to see just the breakaway maybe being allowed out there and controlled, and then the peloton just preparing the sprint for the sprinters. But what a battle, and the riders, this main peloton just blown apart on the run into the finish in this final 30+ kilometres.
Well, Dries de Bont has won the stage. A Grand Tour stage winner, buying a winning lottery ticket from the breakaway. 30 years of age, he's done it. And that is the biggest moment of his career, as well as winning that Belgian national championship. Behind, Juanpe Lopez going to lose time. In the top 10 at the start of the day. He should still be in the top 10. But it makes things a little more difficult to hold that place and hold the white jersey with 2 mountain stages to go. And we are desperate to try and find out what has happened with Jai Hindley. Has there been movement in the general classification? Was it an incident inside the last 3 kilometres? We are hearing that it was a flat tyre inside the last 3 kilometres for Jai Hindley, and if that is confirmed, it means that there'll be no change to the top of the general classification. Dries de Bont does have a change. It's a change in his palmarès. It's a change in his life. He is now Dries de Bont, Giro d'Italia stage winner. And after all of that, they left it very, very late to fight it out, didn't they?
Well, I think everybody was just waiting, and after such an effort, really working well together, nobody wanted to take it up a bit too early. And Affini was the one who was the strongest, but de Bont in the good position in the wheel and just coming over him in the end and getting it on the line.
Half a wheel length for Dries de Bont. He gets the better of Eduardo Affini, who was almost victorious on home roads. Dries de Bont is a Grand Tour stage winner. The breakaway beats the peloton at the Giro d'Italia.
Dries de Bont, what do you say to that? Jonge. He wasn't even necessarily the favourite of that breakaway group at the end, Robbie. Fantastic win for him, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, a sprint's not a sprint anymore when you're in a group like that. They've been off the front all day. They drilled it from over 60 kilometres to go. It's who just has the most left in the legs. And at the end, it's kind of ironic. So for mine, this break managed to stay away mostly, I mean, they all work together, but mostly due to Eduardo Affini and his power. And then he's beaten in a photo finish on the line by Dries de Bont. But you can't take anything away from any of them. They were awesome. They did exactly the right thing to stay out of the grip of the peloton. Because in the end, they only stayed away by 14 or 15 seconds. So they worked together long enough, well enough to make sure one of them was going to win. And that's the heartbreak of the whole thing, that only one of them gets to win.
A fantastic first Grand Tour stage win for Dries de Bont. But even at this stage, Adam, you would think Magnus Kort even was fancying his chances, wasn't he?
I think so, but I think also with Magnus's, he'd never lead out a sprint if he was feeling that good. I think he'd sit back a little bit. And we spoke about with Affini what he might do, and we thought he might, well, I thought he might go on the attack, but I was just saying with Dan, how good would it be if we saw Dries de Bont win? And he did brilliant.
So much to go through, and what was supposed to be a fairly routine stage didn't turn out that way. Let's get some reaction from Sir Bradley.
Well, what a stage that turned out to be. Who would have expected the breakaway to stay away on a day like today with the teams that were behind chasing? Quick Step, did they get it wrong? Well, they did, certainly, because Dries de Bont from Alpecin Phoenix had finally won that stage there. 4 riders, the amazing job they did to stay away. And I'm just seeing some of the faces of the people that have come in now. They're absolutely exhausted. What a day that has been for the riders. There's Vincenzo Nibali over there. Looks like Arnaud Demar cleaned up the points for that Ciclamino jersey on the run in there on the sprint finish there. Beat Mark Cavendish. But how wrong did the sprinters teams get it today? The winner, Dries de Bont, we can see him over there from Alpecin Phoenix.
Well, there is confirmation of the stage results. And Dries de Bont taking it over Eduardo Affini, Magnus Cort in third, Gaburo in fourth. And then we have the rest of the sprinters, Denesi Demar, Chimolai, Cavendish, Gaviria and Consoni.